I think it was the faintest pollen fog.
Oh, that's what I've got.
My car this morning, I swear, I've never seen anything. It's much more here than it is in.
All right, we're live.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the April 8th, 2021 State Board of Education meeting. I'm Eric Davis, Chair of the Board, and I call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome all board members, advisors, staff, visitors, online listeners, and Twitter followers. And I remind the audience and those listening that this body meets monthly with its official meeting typically scheduled for the first Thursday of the month. As we maintain the health and safety mandates in our battle to defeat COVID-19, Board's work was split over 2 days to provide time for the needed discussions from each respective committee. Today, we will conclude with our two remaining committees, Educator Standards and Practice and Business Operations. I remind our visitors and online listeners that you can follow the meeting online and see all of our materials by going to SBE meetings at stateboard.ncpublicschools.gov. Board members are reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. During the course of the meeting, you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest. Please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. This time, I call on my colleague, Ms. Jill Kamnitz, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. We now come to our special recognitions, a time on our agenda when we recognize significant awards, proclamations, resolutions, and those who make a difference in the lives of the public school students we serve each day. Today, we recognize several members of the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction leadership team for their support to districts and charter school students during COVID. Ms. Catherine Joyce of the North Carolina Association of School Administrators, Executive Director, is here to provide the significance of these awards. Ms. Joyce?
Thank you, Chairman Davis and board members. We appreciate the opportunity to be with you this morning to help celebrate some of your own leadership team. Just to let you know a bit about the awards, the North Carolina Association of School Administrators had the distinct pleasure of honoring 3 outstanding education leaders at our annual awards ceremony held at our virtual conference on educational leadership on March 12th. All 3 of these deserving honorees are part of the leadership team at the Department of Public Instruction and the State Board of Education. We named Dr. Beverly Emery and Dr. David Stegall as co-recipients of NCASA's 2021 Champion for Children Award, given annually to an individual, or in this case, individuals, who demonstrate commitment to and leadership in supporting and enhancing public schools in North Carolina. This dynamic duo worked together to help superintendents and other district and school-based leaders overcome the ongoing and immense challenges of COVID-19, beginning with the forced closure of school buildings last spring, quickly ramping up for the switch to remote instruction, and then putting safety protocols and processes in place to support students and staff since for a return to in-person instruction. As key authors of the Lighting Our Way Forward Guidance for Schools, these leaders became a beacon of hope and support for our school leaders, and their leadership makes them shine as champions for children. This award previously has honored former North Carolina governors, state superintendents, lawmakers who led legislation to uplift our K-12 education system, and business leaders who advocate for state-level support for our public schools. So these two honorees are definitely good company as NCASA champions. Last but certainly not least, NCASA annually honors a leader among school leaders with our Raymond Sarbaugh Leadership Award. That award is named for NCASA's first full-time executive director, and it is given to one of our own members each year. We were pleased to honor Mr. Tabari Wallace as the 2021 recipient of this award. His work as a school-based leader, his state-level efforts as North Carolina Principal of the Year to give principals a voice in education policy development, and his going the extra mile for his students all made him worthy of this award. Although school buildings were closed last spring, this drum major for public education and his team delivered a graduation recognition to each graduate at his high school in 2020 to help them celebrate this important achievement. This effort earned him national media acclaim and a guest appearance on The Ellen Show with Ellen DeGeneres. He also caught the eye of our new state superintendent, who has since tapped him as her special advisor for administrator engagement, where he continues to lift up the voice of North Carolina principals and is an ongoing leader among school leaders. NCASA is proud to celebrate the work of Dr. Beverly Emery, Dr. David Stegall, and Mr. Tabari Wallace, and we appreciate the opportunity to share their well-deserved recognition with this board. Congratulations again to all three outstanding public school leaders.
Thank you, Ms. Joyce. Would you join me in congratulating our honorees? Mr. Wallace, would you please share a few remarks? They'll get their turn.
Okay, didn't prepare anything. Just a rookie of so. Used to being over there, so. Giving honor to the chair, Superintendent Catherine Truitt, and the friends. I'm so glad to be back. Lost some words for the first time. Sitting up there, I'm a lost of words. But I want to say what we do every day in the service of children to the adults of the Old North State is rewarding in itself. I'm just honored to even be amongst such greatness during that time. And I just look forward to continuing that service and actually assisting in the adults and the students to become self-actualized. Thank you so much, man.
Dr. Emery?
First, thank you also. Great to see you and be here in person. When Catherine gave this to David and I said, being in the field for 25 years as a superintendent, I had a little survivor's remorse when COVID happened because I almost felt guilty that I wasn't out there with my. But what a blessing to be in a place to serve and support them. There's always divine intervention in why we are where we are. Just so humbled and grateful to have been a place to serve all those people in the field who did great work of last year. It's an honor to be co-awarded with my work brother. Who I really, we knew who each other were, but we didn't really know each other, and nothing like a pandemic to sort of throw you in there and realize, who you can trust. I've been thinking about all the people that I wanted to say in this agency, and I can't because I'll leave someone out, but I know you all in this room know like the folks who usually sit and fill this room up every board meeting, efforts here were just nothing short remarkable, and putting your silo and yourself aside, doing what was right and good and urgent happened in this place, and it was pretty spectacular to be a part. And then finally, I just want to say, particularly to our chair, vice chair, you know the inside stories, and I won't do any inside baseball here publicly, but I always hear, what do you need? Made all the difference in being able to do the work. So I thank you greatly for your support during that time as well.
Dr. Stegall.
I will be very quick. I'm acutely aware that my title and my role at probably less for Bev, because she's one of those that does everything behind the scenes. We get recognized for things that we are the face of, but there are 1,000 other people and processes that are doing the work behind the scenes. I'm very appreciative and very honored, but I do want to thank Bev. Hit the nail on the head. I've never worked in a place that was so agile that they would say literally in the morning, what can we do to make this next thing come to reality? Board, you did that for us. You said, what do you need? Who needs to be at the table? What barriers are keeping you from accomplishing that? And that provided freedom to be responsive to the field. And the other thing that was just so refreshing, that you see in some high functioning organizations, titles didn't matter, years of experience didn't matter, previous roles didn't matter. Everyone rolled up their sleeves and said, who's handling that? How can I help? People mobilize quickly. This award we're the face of it. And I have a little bit of that remorse as well, that I can think of a dozen or more people who've done so much more that I probably have. And I appreciate the fact that they've lifted us all up. And high tides raise all boats, and we have people here pushing us each to do more and to be responsive. And as a former superintendent, as a former teacher, I appreciate a state agency that is so acutely aware of what is going on in the field and not sitting around the table making decisions without the right people. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to we did, and look forward to what happens. Thank you.
Any of my colleagues like to make a few remarks? This is unplanned, so I understand if no one's prepared, but Dr. Oxendine.
I'm listening to their presentations and their recapturing of memories and events that have brought them to this point. And I can only think back to all the different discussions I've had with graduate students at Pembroke about being a leader, what it means to be a leader, what it takes to be in that role. And you three just are the perfect exemplars of that. I have memories of each one of you, and so in different settings, and I will not begin to go through those rich thoughts from working with Stacy, from all the time you spent in Robeson County, coming to Pembroke, energizing graduate students. I am just honored to say that I have walked on this path with you. So proud of you.
Vice Chair Duncan.
Very briefly, we often hear about people who work, and the word used often is tirelessly. These folks that we're honoring today, as of March 14th of last year, they already were working very hard. Just the work that goes on in this department is very hard. They work 7 days a week, at least 12 hours a day for basically the last year. So it's remarkable they're standing here to receive this reward, and we're so pleased that they are, and they are deserving. And as they would point out, they're surrounded by people who are doing the same thing to help make this work, and they are in some parts the face of it, but they're wonderful leaders as faces, and they've done just terrific work. And I don't think we can thank them enough. I don't think the state can ever thank them enough. And I don't think people in the state will ever understand fully the contributions that they've made to the children of our state. We're incredibly thankful to you.
Ms. Camden.
I would just like to echo or pick up on something that Bev just said, and that is that the state of North Carolina and the teachers and the students and this board are blessed that the right people were in the right place at the right time. We're so grateful.
Ms. White.
Classrooms across the state of North Carolina are the perfect laboratory to breed our nation's future leaders. Because you have served as educators, you learned on a day-to-day basis how to pivot, how to quickly adapt, how to quickly shift, how to quickly make the best things happen for students in a small environment. Today, as leaders in the state of North Carolina, you have brought all of those experiences to the pinnacle of what North Carolina needed at just the right time. It's been a blessing to watch you lead. And on behalf of those who served under you, who recognized your yes, we will and yes, we can attitude and a no excuses held, just absolute mantra that kept North Carolina moving forward in a time when we faced unbelievable uncertainty is remarkable and something that will be looked upon for years to come. For the impact that was made. So I thank each of you, but more importantly, so every person who served under your leadership and saw your humility that you brought in an effort to make good things happen for students. So thank you.
Other comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Hall.
thank you, sir. I will be brief. I just congratulate each of the honorees this morning. I'm well aware of the association that's given this honor to each of you. It is not willy-nilly given out. It's for those who do hard work and represent what's the best in public education in this great state. Once again, I do congratulate each one of you, and especially my frat brother, Mr. Wallace. Mr. Wallace, of course, understands the statement, a man of achievement in every field of human endeavors. I congratulate him and all others and wish you well and Godspeed as you go forth in providing the right education for each and every child in this state. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Any other comments? Well, thank you. And I'll just add my thanks as well. There are thousands of leaders in every classroom and school and district across our state. And in your humble way, you're right. You're the face of them. But boy, are we glad you're the face of them. Because that's a face that's worth getting behind, having confidence in, believing in. We believe in you and we believe in every one of those thousands of leaders across our state that you represent. So thank you for your sacrifice. This time I'll now recognize Dr. Catherine Edmonds to provide an update on a recent national recognition received by the Exceptional Children Division of DPI. Dr. Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, Lieutenant Governor Robinson, board members and colleagues. It is my honor and pleasure to recognize the Exceptional Children Division this morning. The Exceptional Children Division, through the application submitted by the North Carolina State Improvement Project staff, has received accreditation for a 5-year period from the International Dyslexia Association for the Reading Research to Classroom Practice 40-hour course on the science of reading, delivered by approximately 300 certified instructors across the state. As part of the requirements, the Exceptional Children Division Program Improvement and Professional Development Regional Literacy Consultants have all passed the Knowledge and Practice exam for effective reading instruction required by the International Dyslexia Association, which measures an educator's knowledge of the principles and practices of structured literacy. I would like to share a statement from the IDA accreditation team. On behalf of the IDA accreditation team members, let me begin by saying that it was a pleasure to review North Carolina's Reading Research to Classroom Practice course and its adjunct courses on dyslexia and dysgraphia. Your courses serve as a role model for other states' Department of Education offices to follow in order to provide educators throughout the United States the knowledge and practice standards required for expert literacy instruction. The team found that collectively, the Reading Research to Classroom Practice course met all the requirements for accreditation through the International Dyslexia Association. The IDA review team shared strengths of the programs, and I would like to share a few of those with you now. The Reading Research to Classroom Practice is a wonderful mechanism for updating and extending professional learning about reading instruction. The course has strong methods for providing ongoing feedback and intervention for instructor candidates during the course. The program of study is described clearly. Strong methods for providing ongoing feedback and intervention for instructor candidates during the course. Participants understood the relationship with phonemic awareness, decoding, etc. Participants understood how environmental factors contributed to literacy development. And the course exceeded expectations in the substandards of the structured literacy instruction. The International Dyslexia Association CEO, Sandra Banks, commented, "This achievement exemplifies the quality and commitment necessary for a program to effectively prepare teachers, according to IDA's knowledge and practice standards for teachers of reading. To teach every student in our schools to read, especially those who struggle. The North Carolina Department of Public Instruction is the first state department to receive this accreditation. The International Dyslexia Association provides IDA accredited programs with the IDA accreditation seal. As a mark of quality, the IDA seal conveys to current and prospective students, as well as our communities of interest, a commitment to the knowledge and practice standards for teachers of reading. The International Dyslexia Association highly recommends displaying the accredited status by utilizing the seal on our program's website and in program materials. This work is led by Dr. Paula Crawford, Section Chief in the Exceptional Children's Division. At this time, I would like to recognize and congratulate Sherry Thomas, the Director of the Exceptional Children Division, Dr. Paula Crawford, Section Chief, and the Exceptional Children Division staff on this huge accomplishment and for exemplifying State Superintendent Truitt's cultural norms of aim true and achieve together, as well as the State Board of Education's commitment to equity for all. So congratulations to the Exceptional Children Program on this huge accomplishment.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. Please join me in congratulating our honorees. Thank you, Dr. Edmonds, and add our congratulations to Ms. Thomas, Dr. Crawford, and every member of the team who achieved this award. And just in case you missed it, this team is the first to receive this award in our nation. In typical North Carolina fashion, the first. Congratulations. Any comments or questions on this terrific award?
Mr. Chair.
Superintendent Truitt.
In addition to being first, this is also significant because the IDA is the gold standard for early literacy instruction that meets the needs of all children. And Reading Research to Classroom Practice is grounded in the science of reading and will be one of our partners as we begin to train teachers in letters, which is a longer, more detailed, intensive training, but certainly one that carries the legacy of reading research to classroom practice, which is very unique in its approach to teaching early literacy. Again, it cannot be underestimated or understated how important reading research to classroom practice is, as has been demonstrated by the IDA's recognition of this important program. And we're just so grateful to Dr. Crawford and Sherry Thomas for their hard work.
Thank you, Superintendent. We are grateful, Ms. Thomas and Dr. Crawford and your entire team. Thank you so much. We'll now receive an update from our partners at the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. Our collaboration with them during COVID has and continues to be crucial to informing our policy and delivering effective practice. Today's update will include information on vaccinations, any spread in our schools and districts, and guidance on 2021 graduations and proms across our state. We look forward to future updates informed by the ABC Collaborative recently mandated in legislation. I now call on Chief Deputy Secretary Gail Perry and her team from DHHS for today's presentation. Chief Deputy.
Well, good morning, Chairman Davis. Good morning, Superintendent Truitt, and all the board members and folks on the call today. It's great to be with you. I had the chance to join just a little bit early and heard all of the wonderful awards and accolades, well-deserved, impressive work. I particularly want to lend my gratitude and praise to Dr. David and Dr. Bev. I can remember, so long ago, a year now, when I was wide-eyed and a little bit freaked out inside at the State Emergency Operations Center. And David was there and Bev were there, and we had never worked together, and it's been quite a journey. So I'm so grateful for their leadership and their partnership and all the amazing work they've done on behalf of schools over this last year. I'm going to start by just giving a very quick and brief update on where we are in terms of our overall trends. So I'm going to start by taking a look at our case rates. We could move to the third slide, and then I will turn it over to Dr. Malik and Dr. Tilson for the rest of the presentation. So I think the upshot is good news. North Carolina's COVID-19 metrics have remained stable over the past month as we have cautiously eased restrictions. If we could move to the next slide quickly. And that just, again, I typically show this slide, shows you the case rates per 100,000 by age, and you can see that plateauing. So, we went through some precipitous decline, which was great, but we are now plateauing and seeing a little bit of an uptick here and there, but generally plateauing. So good stable cases. Next slide, please. Also just taking a look at it by race and ethnicity, you see similar trends by both race and ethnicity. And then I'll take a quick look on the next slide at our clusters. And you can see continued number of clusters in more clusters that we're seeing in private schools and public schools. That trend has continued. There are right now 1,840 cases associated with all K-12 clusters, and the breakdown is there for you to see with 45 currently active clusters. And I think the other things I would add before I move on is just that our percent of tests returning positive remains steady, and the number of hospitalizations have overall leveled. And although North Carolina does remain in a stable position, before I move into talking about screening testing, I do want to say that now is not the time to let our guard down. We are seeing, and I'm sure you are seeing in the news, rising numbers in other parts of the country and across the world. We know that this virus is still very much out there, and new, more infectious variants are spreading, and we will all need to continue to be careful and responsible as we race to get all North Carolinians vaccinated. I am going to turn it over to Dr. Malik now to talk about screening testing. I'll just start by saying that As I think some of you will recall, we did talk about this at the last state board meeting, and we have presented a little bit of information on the pilot schools and districts that participated in using the Binax Now antigen screening testing to help students come back and staff come back to school more quickly and confidently. We are seeing increasing support for screening testing from the CDC, stronger recommendations coming out about that, in addition to some additional funding that Dr. Malik will talk about here in just a minute. So I think we are, and we do have some evidence from national studies now that have found that the weekly testing of students, of teachers, and staff can reduce in-school infections by an estimated 50%. So there is real value in using these screening testings. As you know, we did move away from requiring the daily symptom screening, the temperature check, and the asking of the questions, but these screening tests, again, provide just another layer of mitigation and protection, another tool in the toolbox that we are strongly recommending that schools and districts consider implementing, and we're going to try to make that process easier for schools moving forward. And with that, let me turn it over now to Dr. Malik to talk a little bit more about the screening testing and more details about the funding opportunity and next steps. Dr. Malik?
Thank you, Chief Deputy Secretary. And I will echo the thank you to all of you for allowing us to be here with you today. And I will add my voice to the chorus of congratulations and thank you for all of the incredible work that this group of people have been doing for over a year now. Let's move to the next slide, please. And next one, please. So you all will recall that we have shared information about testing a number of times now, and I want to set the context before we go into a bit more detail about the testing offerings moving forward and getting into some of the additional funding that's been made available to us. I'll re-emphasize here that testing is really part of layers and layers of mitigation strategies to help keep in-person instruction as safe as possible for students, teachers, and staff. So that's really alongside universal mask use, physical distancing, hand washing, and clean protocols. Two different types of testing that I think are worth reviewing here. The first is diagnostic testing, which really means if you have symptoms of COVID, fever, cough, at school, or recent or known close contact to somebody who's tested positive for COVID-19. So when we do testing in those circumstances, it's called diagnostic testing. Drawing a distinction from diagnostic testing is screening testing. So that's and people who may have no symptoms at all, and doing the testing on a regular routine basis, for example, weekly, to check for COVID. And to be what that enables us to do is in classrooms and schools across the state to be able to identify cases early. And as Chief Deputy Secretary Gail Perry mentioned, that sort of weekly screening testing has been shown to reduce in-school infections by up to 50%. So really a helpful means of stopping transmission, even as we are ramping up vaccinations statewide. Let's move to the next slide, please. So I want to take a minute here to actually bring this to life. We talk a lot about testing as a concept and certainly as a mitigation strategy. And my hope with this slide is to add a little bit more real world detail as to what exactly this looks like in practice, right? What happens to the tests? Who does them? Where do they go, et cetera? So all of this starts on, and for those following along on the slides, starting on the left-hand side of the slide here, it really does start with community engagement and awareness building, right? So we've seen schools host town halls or send email communications or letters home with students to inform parents and guardians about the testing program. And The school then has the ability to discuss the testing program with parents and guardians and request their consent. Consent is required to do any testing in students or children. Then, practically speaking, at school, and now I'm moving into the testing bucket here, students and staff arrive at school and are directed to a testing location. And you'll see in that photo there that the staff that are doing the testing are in PPE. So they're wearing gowns, they're wearing gloves, they have masks on. And then the testing is completed by staff. And you'll see, I'm looking now at that very cute little boy with a Q-tip up his nose. And there, I want to pause here and say the testing in schools can be rapid antigen tests or can be what we call lab-based PCR tests. And the reason that matters is so far, you all will recall that we had rapid tests made available to us across the state by the federal government. And so our school-based testing program so far has really focused on rapid tests. And that is a card about the size of a credit card. The Q-tip goes into the nose, and the Q-tip then goes into the card. The card is closed. It sits on a table for 15 minutes, and the results are available right then and there. So actually the test itself and the Q-tip doesn't travel anywhere. That's what we call a point of care test. By contrast, some schools either have available today or will in a forward-looking way have available to them PCR-based tests. And in those cases, the tests actually do travel. So the Q-tip is inserted into the child's nose, as you see in that center picture. And then the Q-tip, or swab more accurately, is then put into a secure container and sent off to a lab. So depending on the type of test, the school will do something different with the physical test itself. Either, again, with a rapid antigen point of care test, they'll have an answer right then and there, or with a send-off lab-based PCR test, they'll have an answer within 24 to 48 hours. Now, moving across the slide into results and response, the results are communicated, again, either at the point of care or back to the school via the lab, and then actions are taken based on those results to either isolate or quarantine or say, hey, test is negative, and then there's, depending on the circumstance, action steps that follow from there. Let's move to the next slide. So I want to situate this in the context of where we've been and where are we going. So when we think about where we started back in the fall and earlier this year, we had come to this group describing a pilot of diagnostic testing based on using those rapid antigen tests available to a subset of schools that chose to participate in the pilot. Then in phase 2, so last month in March, we opened up that opportunity to all schools and expanded it from not just diagnostic testing, which you'll recall is testing of anyone with symptoms or a close contact, but expanded to screening testing, which again is anyone, regardless of symptoms, in an effort to try and catch infections early and stop the spread. What we're now eager to announce is the new phase 3, and that's the darkest shade of blue or the widest circle. And I would encourage all of us to think about this as really an expansion of existing opportunities, and how do we really widen the circle of schools across the state for whom testing support is available. So you will may have heard in the news that federal funding as part of the rescue plan has been made available for states upon application, specifically to facilitate end-to-end screening testing in K through 12 schools. So our sincere hope is that schools will be excited to take advantage of this opportunity, and certainly the infusion of new funding helps solve for potential historical barriers of staffing or reporting or availability of tests. And so again, our hope here is that this can, in line with CDC guidance, really be an added layer of protection in the classroom, and that the funding really helps catalyze that. Let's move to the next slide, please. This is just to give you an overview. The numbers that you see here on this slide relate to the distribution of tests during phase 2. So that was when we expanded to screening tests for all schools, school districts, charter schools, and private schools across the state. For the use in diagnostic testing, screening testing, and testing related to athletics, spring break, or special events. In total, the main number that I'll draw your attention to here is that we've distributed over 63,000 tests as part of this phase. Really, again, in an effort to make testing as widely available as possible. Let's move to the next slide, please. So now a little bit more detail or information about that funding that we've mentioned a few times here. That funding is really what's enabling us to expand statewide screening testing support for all K-12 schools. That includes public schools, private schools, charter schools across the state. The CDC announced this ELC Reopening Schools Award, which provides $10 billion in allocated funding across all states. So North Carolina wouldn't be getting all $10 billion, just to be clear, but available as early as April this month through the end of the school year next year. 85% of those dollars must be used to fund schools and either the procurement or provision of testing supplies or services, meaning those dollars can be spent directly by schools or used to fund a vendor who can provide testing supplies or services to schools. DHHS is applying to utilize that award to further support schools in our efforts to continue the safe in-person instruction by providing funding resources for screening of students, teachers, and staff. I want to emphasize, as we have previously, to say that this is really opt-in testing, and our hope is that as many schools across the state will choose to opt into this and select a testing plan from a menu of options, which I'll get to in a moment, that utilize this resource in a way that best fits their community. But again, opt-in, large sum of money available as soon as this month through the end of next school year. Thank you. And so this is that menu of options that I was just alluding to. If we start all the way on the left-hand side, I want folks to think about these as usable as independent options, like sort of an a la carte menu, but also usable in conjunction with each other, like you can pick and choose across these different columns. So all the way on the left-hand side, for those following along via video, is a state contracted vendor. The vendor is the contract, and the scoping of this is all under development, but not yet available. And I want to be very clear on the timeline here. The goal is to have that available by the start of next school year. And this would be a set of services available to districts or individual schools to implement a screening testing program. If we look at the middle column of state supplied tests, and this is what's available right now, NCDHHS has free rapid antigen tests that schools can request to perform screening or diagnostic testing. Happy to share the online form or request link again with anyone here. But again, those are available right now. And then the third column all the way on the right is what we've deemed other local approaches. And this is really in homage to what we know to be a lot of creativity that's already happening. Districts, schools, local health departments, and other providers working together to define an approach that works best for them, with or without the state, really, but defined as a partnership between the school and providers, to implement a screening program that works best for them. What I'll underscore across the bottom of that last slide is, again, that the screening testing is on an opt-in recommended basis as a mitigation strategy across the state. All of these options would require parental or guardian consent for the testing of students, and certainly for the protection of privacy. And this is the last slide in this section. What I want to highlight here is next steps and sort of what happens from here. DHHS is submitting a funding request and a plan to the CDC for a statewide vendor to support screening tests in schools. Again, that would really be focused on a ramp up for this upcoming school year, so the fall of 2021. In the meantime, so for the remaining few months of the 2020 to 2021 school year, tests will continue to be available at no cost to schools through the state. I'll emphasize again that those tests can be used for diagnostic testing, people with symptoms or close contacts, also for serial screening testing. And so again, people who are asymptomatic, who don't have symptoms, but we want to catch infection early on. Additionally available for screening for athletes, holidays, and special events, all of which we've heard from some of our partner schools are important areas that folks care about. I also want to emphasize for this group's awareness that we have office hours and training sessions as support available to anyone at any school across the state looking to implement or improve their programs. So my final pitch here would be, as schools as folks are making plans for summer school and the fall semester, please do consider how incorporating screening or diagnostic testing is going to help keep your students, staff, and teachers as safe as possible and in the classroom as much as possible. So recognizing the time, and with that, I will turn the mic over to my colleague, Dr. Betsy Tilson.
Wonderful. Can you all hear me okay?
Stan?
Yes.
Great, great. All right, wonderful. And I will go through these slides relatively quickly, knowing that you have the deck. I want to point out what can be good points of reference and some of the data as well that I want to be sure you also know how to navigate. I'll go through these relatively quickly. But I want to give an update on our vaccine distribution and also make sure that you have some updated information and references and tools around vaccination. So the first really exciting news yesterday was everybody 16 and up in North Carolina is now eligible for vaccine. Hope that you're aware that that happened yesterday. Really, really exciting, big day of celebration, something we've been looking forward to be able to do for quite a while. So we're really excited about that. Everybody 16 and up eligible as of yesterday. The next slide, please. And I just wanted to highlight some of the data that I want to be sure that you know is publicly available on our vaccine dashboard. You have the link there. Really want you to follow along with us. We've put a lot of work in getting a lot of that data transparency on that dashboard. I'm going to highlight some of the data that we track and also invite you to do as much of a data deep dive as possible, because we only can get better if we know our data and we track it. But a couple of highlights that I wanted to point out, and also that this data is a couple days old. We got our slides prepared ahead of time, so a couple days old, and I can give a little bit of update of some of our numbers. But the top left is the view that you can see where we are in terms of number of doses administered. So we have administered more than 5 million doses in North Carolina. That actually puts us the 8th state with the highest amount of doses administered, and we're the 9th highest populated state. So we're doing quite well in terms of the number of doses administered. The other piece that we're looking at pretty closely is then what does that relate to the percent of the population vaccinated. And so you'll see And you'll see new on our dashboard as well, not only the percent of people 18 and up that are vaccinated, but the percent of 65 and up, and we're tracking that. So as of Monday, it was about 38% of our people 18 and up were vaccinated, and now we're actually about 40%, so making progress every day. So we're very, very excited about that. On the bottom left, you'll see just week by week the number of doses that we are, our providers are administering, and so really accelerating. And on the right-hand slide, I think this is just an interesting slide to think about our trends and our patterns of vaccination. And this is week by week, looking at the age of the people getting vaccinated. In the very beginning, as you remember, we were vaccinating our healthcare workers, so we had a wide variety of ages. And then you'll see the green and that dark blue. Those are our 65 and 75-year-old up. As you know, that was a big priority in the beginning of our vaccination because those folks are the highest risk of death and severe hospitalization. So you'll see a big surge of those populations. And now as we move to the right, you'll see now again an evening out of the ages. We're getting a lot of our frontline essential workers. And what you'll also see now on that right is starting some of our 16 and 17-year-olds starting in as well. So thinking through that, some of the high schoolers are beginning to get vaccinated as well, which we're excited. And in that bottom right, you can see the percentage of penetration in those populations. One thing when you go back and look at the slides, I invite you to match the slides that Susan Gale Perry did about the case rate to the vaccination rates. And one of the incredible correlations, you'll see that the rate of cases in our 65 and older is the most precipitous drop. That actually is the age group now that has the lowest rate of cases, and that really is directly correlated to the that prioritization of vaccination and the percentage of that vaccination being vaccinated. So already seeing a really strong protective effect of vaccinations on case rates. So we're excited to see that. Okay, next slide, please. The other pieces that we also want to be sure we have a laser focus on is equity of our distribution. And we still have work to do, but we are making progress, but definitely have work to do. On the top left, you will see week by week the percentage of vaccinations that are going out based on different racial groups. And the purple bar is our white population. That darker blue is our Black and African American population. The yellow is our Asian population. And that very small tier at the very top is our Native Americans. And on the far right, you'll see the percentage of the total population made up by our different demographic groups. And so you'll see that as we moved along, we have had more equitable distribution of our vaccinations. Obviously, we want to be sure that we are vaccinating our population at least proportional to what people are made up of in terms of our total population. We're not quite there yet. You can see where we were the week of 329. We're not quite there yet. Our African American population makes up about 23% of our total population, and we're not quite there yet, but we're making progress. We're keeping a sharp eye on that. And on the right, you'll see this breakdown by ethnicity, looking at our Latinx population. We still have work to do with that, but the good news is the last couple of weeks, we have been vaccinating our Latinx population in proportion to that makeup of our total population. Okay, next slide. A couple other things, just specifically around our K-12, and we know these are estimates, but we know at least more than 76,000 individuals who we have identified themselves as an educator has been vaccinated, and we know there's been at least 30 events specifically set aside for educators in that state, in the state. But we know this is an undercount because a lot of our vaccinating providers are just using their routine vaccinations to vaccinate our educators. Next slide, please. A couple other things. Just wanted to be sure that you have seen there's been now many articles coming out and studies coming out about the real world effectiveness and safety of the vaccines. Obviously, we were relying on the data from the clinical trials at the beginning of the vaccination, but now more studies in the real world application as more and more people are getting vaccinated. And the really good news is that all of that very promising data from the clinical trials of this being very effective and safe vaccines have borne out as we've been doing the real world application of the vaccination in our population. So really, really promising and good news that is borne out. And I'll call attention to the very bottom slide study. This one just came out last week from the CDC that actually helped answer the question that we didn't have data from the clinical trials, and that is, does vaccination actually prevent you from getting infections, including asymptomatic infection, and therefore also prevent your ability to spread? And based on this data, where they actually went and they tested people every week to see if they had an infection, regardless of symptoms or not, and found very strong prevention of any sort of infection, including asymptomatic infection, and therefore decreasing the ability to spread. So that was the data point we were waiting for, and we got last week. So very, very promising results, that these are great vaccines. Okay, next slide, please. And then just a little bit, and I believe this is my last content slide, and the last ones I will just make sure you're aware of some resources that are available for you. But really looking ahead, okay, what about our kids? Obviously, that's a really important conversation as we think through schools. Again, obviously, these are very safe and effective vaccines for all of our staff and adults and our 16-year-olds and up. But what about our younger kids? You may have heard, but that Pfizer has already released some data that shows that the Pfizer vaccine is, data shows it's safe and effective for people 12 to 15. They will be bringing that data to the FDA, and we will see then if the FDA authorizes the Pfizer vaccine for the 12-year-olds. Just as a reminder, Pfizer is the only one right now authorized for 16 and over. It's the Moderna and the Johnson & Johnson who are still only authorized for 18 and over. But we're excited to think too that we may get data to be able to use Pfizer for 12 to 15-year-olds. Moderna is also enrolling younger people in their clinical trials as well, 12 to 15-year-olds. So we're really excited that hopefully we'll have data coming out soon from potentially both Pfizer and Moderna that may authorize younger, and we can get some of those middle and those younger high schoolers vaccinated over the summer, depending on what the data shows. And Johnson & Johnson also just announced that they'll be including adolescents in their trials as well. The other bit of news you may have heard as well is that both Pfizer and Moderna are also starting trials with even younger kids, 6 months to 11 years. So these will be elementary and our pre-K. I anticipate these trials taking a little bit longer because they'll have to be really adjusting doses and doing different protocols, but they're already in the works. And so hopefully, depending on what the data shows, that it may be that we can also potentially vaccinate our younger kids, maybe even by beginning of next year. But I think we'll be a lot closer for our middle and high schoolers, potentially before the start of the school year. And then the last three slides are just as a reminder of really, really great resources. Make sure that it's all publicly available on our website. If you want to use to communicate to your staff, to your and to your constituents, lots of great communication tools that you'll see on this slide and on the next two slides, specifically tailored for our educators that you make sure that you're aware of. And then the last one is also making sure people are aware of how they can access vaccines. And we do have our updated Find Your Spot vaccine locator that people can Google where they are, find a vaccine provider in their area. We've also added the ability to say what vaccine each of our vaccine providers have. So again, if a high schooler or a parent is looking for a 16 to 17-year-old, they can know who has Pfizer, who has Johnson & Johnson if they want the one-dose option. And so we have updated that as well for to make it as easy as possible. And with that, I am done, and I will turn it back over to Chief Deputy Secretary.
Thank you, Dr. Tilson. Thanks, everyone. Just if we could just quickly move to the last slide here, I will just remind everyone that we did do an additional update to the Strong Schools NC guidance. I know you all are well aware of this, as this was a topic of discussion last time. But just a reminder, as I said at the beginning, daily symptom screenings can be considered, but are not recommended for children. Do want to emphasize that, not recommended for children part. So if they are being done, we would not recommend that they be done for children. And change the toolkit to really reflect the K-12 grade should return to in-person instruction, and incorporated the new updated CDC physical guidance regarding the 3 feet and the 3 feet between children. So those were the key changes. I think everybody's aware of them, and we are happy to take any questions at this time. Back to you, Chairman Davis.
Thank you, Chief Deputy. Questions and comments from my colleagues?
Chairman Davis.
Oh. Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you. For the presenters, this may be more of a run the trains operational question as it is a health question, but I'm very interested in your response. The Treasurer's Office, Department of Public Instruction, as you know, employ tens and tens of thousands of people. So my question is, what is your understanding of the rules regarding asking an employee whether they've been vaccinated? That's the first question. Number two, do they have to respond? Number three, what if an employee says, and this happens at DHHS also, I'm sure, what happens if an employee says, I don't like vaccinations, I'm not going to get vaccinated? If you can't ask, you can't verify, what medical operational advice do you have for this board and this public schools?
Thanks for that question, Treasurer. And I'm going to ask Dr. Tilson to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think there's lots of things in there. I think that when thinking through, it is personal health information, so thinking through with your legal team, but where you are where you may require people to release their personal health information piece, it's more of a legal issue. And I think from a public health standpoint, that what we wanted to be sure that is if people know, making sure that vaccine is available to people, and that I don't know that there's going to be a magic number of what percent of the population needs to be vaccinated to prevent spread, but the more people that we can get vaccinated, obviously, the better. But I think from the question is, can you require employees to release a personal authentication? Is that legal question around employee law? And then from a public health standpoint, of course, the more people vaccinated, the better. But I don't know that there's a magic number that I can say, if this proportion of your population is vaccinated, then it is safe. The more people, of course, the better.
Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, I understand the legal part of this, the emotional part of this, and the medical part of this. I'm just, the people on this board and people listening to this call, as I said earlier, eventually, we are in the check delivering business at the Treasurer's Office. The people at DPI are in the growing minds business, and that takes personnel. And I hope that, and I hope you'll comment on this, I just hope that we will think through challenge assumptions and think through commonsensically what can really be done here. Because if a person says that they live with an older person, you can't verify they live with an older person. Or if they say that they live with an older person, but that older person refuses to be vaccinated, so therefore they can't come to work. I mean, these are real issues facing state government at all levels. So I'd love for you to comment on that.
Dr. Tilson?
and I apologize. I'm not quite sure I understand the question posed, and I apologize for missing that, but I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, I guess let me rephrase. I guess the question,
Okay.
you work for DHHS, correct?
Yes, sir.
And they employ thousands and maybe tens of thousands of people. I'm just saying that since you're in the business of administering and monitoring and advocating for vaccinations, but you're also an employer of people, how are you meshing all of that, and what can we learn from how you're doing that inside your own agency that could possibly benefit DPI and school systems across North Carolina? Maybe that's a better question.
Okay, yes, that one is a great question. Yes. So I think, this is what we are doing from a DHHS standpoint for our own employees, right, is that we are making sure that all of our employees have the information that they need to really understand about the safety and the efficacy of vaccines. A lot of that outreach, that educational outreach, and a lot of the work that we've been working with partners, and I would also encourage, of course, DPI and our school partners, is the first step is making sure our employees have the information that they need to really make that informed decision about the vaccines, making sure they understand it is safe and effective. So we do a lot of outreach and a lot of work with our employees so that they even understand that to make that decision of what's right for them. Second, making sure that we can make sure the vaccines are as accessible and easy for them, and making sure they understand how to navigate to the vaccine, how to get to the vaccine, making it as easy for them as possible. We also have done some of our own HR accommodations, thinking through making sure people have time off if they want to go get a vaccine, making sure they would have time off if a day or two after the vaccination they have a temporary side effect, so that they don't feel that their employment could be jeopardized by them going to get a vaccine. So doing a lot of the facilitating pieces. And then as we think about bringing our people back to work, what we've been thinking through is once we know that everybody is eligible and there's been enough time that everybody who wants a vaccine can get a vaccine, then we will be bringing people back to work, but not necessarily. What we will not be collecting that information on, are you vaccinated, are you not vaccinated, and making a decision if people are coming back to work based on their own individual vaccination status. We're making sure people are aware and accessible, and then we'll be making our overall decisions for our populations once we know everybody who wanted a vaccine can get a vaccine. So that's how we are going about it with our own.
Okay. Thank you. And I would just respond just with a comment, and it's not something you need to respond to, but we actually asked DHHS to come over and vaccinate our employees since we're in the check delivery business. And we were turned down from that. And we hear of all these instances where people are getting their employees vaccinated, just like come to the building and we'll vaccinate people at socially distanced, obviously. And so, I mean, I just think that I hope that DHHS will be looking at how they can help DPI, how they can help OST or any other major state agency. And I hope they'll come up with a plan and a process for how to actually come to the premises and vaccinate people. And I'll just close by saying this. I just checked somebody in for an airport for a flight to get a boarding pass. And you have to check on there that you've been vaccinated, or for CDC purposes or information purposes. So this whole blurriness between public safety and what you can ask people and what people can refuse to tell us is something we've got to get more clear-minded about if we want to actually be safe and operationalize the public school system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer, and thank you, Chief Deputy Perry and your team for this report. As we remain diligent in using all the mitigation tools and practices, we'll continue to maintain the health and safety and reduce the spread of this virus. Supporting screening in schools provides us with another tool that helps our school doors remain open for in-person instruction, and we support and encourage more districts and charter schools to opt into the screening process that was presented today, which has proven to be beneficial in the safety of our schools our families, our communities, and the state. We look forward to next month's presentation, and thank you again, Chief Deputy and your team.
Thank you, Chairman Davis. And I will just say we did have, I know that Dr. Stegall was going to speak a little bit to prom guidance. Didn't know if you wanted to defer that for now, but it was also in the slide deck.
Yeah, we'll defer that for now and come back to it later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now turn to Superintendent Truitt for Superintendent's report, followed by a report on community affairs and legislative updates from Ms. Pittman and Mr. McKinney. Superintendent Truitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to my colleagues on the State Board of Education and in the room, and to those of you who are watching online and listening. I'm very honored and excited to be sharing these slides with you today. It is the culmination of the first 90 days of this administration and the incredibly hard work of the members of my team, of whom I could not be more proud. The purpose of my report this morning is to share with you what I would describe as a strategic plan or a plan across the next 4 years that will encompass three things: the North Star of this administration. It will encompass the findings and recommendations of the WestEd report, and it will encompass the State Board's strategic plan. This group has heard me talk before that the North Star of this administration is that every student deserves a highly qualified, excellent teacher in every classroom. And I just want to start by talking about what it means to have this as a North Star. I think frequently the idea of a North Star gets conflated with a goal. And while this is a great goal to have, that every student deserves a highly qualified and excellent teacher in every classroom, a North Star is more than just a goal. It is aspirational, but moreover, it is a way to ensure that we get where we need to go. A North Star, in essence, is a navigation tool. The North Star is what sailors since time immemorial have used to find their way. And so when people ask me, what do I mean by North Star? What is your North Star? Yes, this is a very worthy goal, of course, but it is also the way that we ensure we're keeping students at the center of all we do. It's how we stay on course no matter where we are. So with that, I would like to reveal to you our playbook across the next 4 years, which we have termed Operation Polaris. So you'll notice that at the center of Operation Polaris is the Office of Learning Recovery. The Office of Learning Recovery is the starting point for this work. Learning loss is real, and we must support public school units to recover this loss while also creating opportunities for learning acceleration. This graphic shows the cross-functional nature of how DPI as an organization is operating right now and will for the next 4 years. So I'll go over this graphic really quickly, and then I'm going to take you into a little bit more detail. So the Office of Learning Recovery is at the center of this graphic, surrounded by the district and school transformation team, which will operationalize the work of the Office of Learning Recovery. Then, bless you, there is also 4 satellites that surround these two pieces. They are student support services, accountability and testing, human capital, and literacy. So I want to talk for a moment specifically about, if you go to the next slide, sorry, the Office of Learning Recovery and Acceleration. led by Dr. Michael Marr. You can see here that there are, as with all of the groups, the working groups at the agency, members within DPI and outside of DPI. And so you can, I just want to highlight a couple of folks here. Fred Steen is serving as a liaison to all of our local school boards. While we also have representative from the state board, Dr. Townsend Smith is, if you will, floating across multiple groups. And then you'll notice that we have an elementary school principal and 2 folks from higher education helping Dr. Marr, bless you, to lead this work. The mission of this team is to serve our public school units by providing research and support needed to make evidence-based decisions to combat learning loss and accelerate learning for all students. The group will interface with district and school transformation and collaborate with each of the constituents within DPI. They will also partner with our public schools and other stakeholders to bring needed solutions to long-standing challenges facing North Carolina public education. They will do this by identifying areas of strength for improvement. They will look at programs, policies, and intervention needed to assist in learning recovery. They will provide technical and other assistance to those who need it through the Office of District and School Transformation. And they will develop a research program to evaluate the effectiveness of these interventions that are begun by our public school units and the Department of Public Instruction. And I want to pause here and think for a second. There will be school districts that that do not necessarily need the help of the Office of Learning Recovery and Acceleration, but the vast majority of our districts need support from this agency to come alongside them and provide technical assistance, help them build capacity, help them with capacity they don't currently have, so that they can provide and meet the individual needs of their students. So now I want to shift to the Office of District and School Transformation. This group is led by Dr. Bev Emery and includes these members. And you'll start to see what I mean when I talk about the cross-functionality of this work. Again, you have folks from across the agency as well as outside of DPI working with this team. And I want to call your attention to the next slide, which is a graphical representation of this office. So for the past few years, we've had a regional case manager model supporting districts in the communities where these folks live. And then we've also had the district regional support team, which is supporting schools. And there wasn't necessarily consistent, cohesive collaboration between these 2 groups, with one in the district and one in the schools. And so what we've endeavored to do under Bev's leadership is to create a single office of district and school transformation. And then it has 3 divisions within itself. It has a division of district and regional engagement, which is bolstered by the regional case manager model. It has a division of diagnostics and data analytics, which includes the work of our comprehensive needs assessment teams, which this board heard a presentation by, I believe, in February. And then over on the right-hand side, you have Dr. Cynthia Martin's division of transformation. So this is going to be where a new school turnaround model can be implemented, as is in line with the Leandro recommendations, that the agency supports chronically low performing schools. And then you can see here that all 3 of these divisions feed into the Office of Learning Recovery as these divisions will operationalize the work of Dr. Marr's team. They will diagnose, customize, and activate support from this agency to address critical components of the other Operation Polaris work groups. They will also prioritize support for our most challenged school districts in coordination with Leandro. The next group is the Accountability and Testing Group. This is a very interesting challenge that Dr. Segal has taken on. At the time of the formation of this group, there were no less than 10 various advocacy groups working on a new school accountability model. This is something that there is, by and large, agreement on within the education community that we need a new school accountability model that does more to prioritize growth rather than having our current 80% achievement, 20% growth model, as well as create a multiple measures approach to defining what school quality is. So what we did in forming this group was to take a member or two from all of the groups that were currently working on a school accountability model so that we would have as much representation as possible. So the vision for this group is to transform our K-12 accountability system to ensure a sound basic education for every student by measuring success based on preparedness for the workforce, higher education, and robust civic participation. And as is highlighted in the Leandro recommendations, we must, in order to align high school to post-secondary and career expectations, this state must have a graduate profile. And that is job one of this accountability and testing group. We must have a graduate profile that is informing our accountability model rather than the other way around. And so what our graduates need to know and be able to do as they are entering their post-secondary endeavors needs to be reflected in a statewide graduate profile. And we have districts that already have a district-wide graduate profile, and those leaders are participating and weighing in on what a statewide graduate profile could look like. Next, we have student support. This group is led by Dr. Robert Taylor and includes outside representation from No Kid Hungry and DIT, as this group will really be looking to ensure, next slide, that we are coordinating student support services from everything from nutrition to ensuring that we have broadband connectivity. So this group will not just look at traditional things like school facilities and nutrition and school safety, but also will really be diving into the social emotional impact of the pandemic and how we can support districts as students come back to school and begin to recover. And last but not least, we have our literacy work group. This group is led by Dr. Catherine Edmonds and has significant outside participation because this is a piece that impacts pre-K, K-12, the community college system, and the UNC system as we all work to ensure that teachers at all of those levels have the information they need to provide early literacy instruction methods that are grounded in the science of reading. So the vision of this group is to equip all pre-K through 5th grade teachers, literacy coaches, and administrators with early literacy instruction methods grounded in the body of research known as the science of reading. Oops. Now, last but not least, got ahead of myself. Human capital, which is surely central to the North Star of this administration, as well as the board's strategic plan of removing barriers, as well as the Leandra recommendations around teacher and principal recruitment and retention. This group is led by Dr. Derek Jordan and includes members from the from workforce, but as well as you'll see Dr. Patrick Miller from the Pepsi Commission, because this group will be working on the recommendations of the Human Capital Roundtable as they look to improve recruitment for teachers as well as principals. And you can see here that their vision is to cultivate people and systems to improve the recruitment and retention of highly qualified teachers, administrators, and support personnel for every public school unit in North Carolina. So before I close and turn things over to Dr. Marr, I would like to again highlight the alignment that exists with the North Star of the agency, as well as the state board's goals. And what Dr. Marr is going to talk about specifically is opportunity with the federal funding that has come to our state via ESSER 3 and possibly ESSER 2. So, okay, Dr. Marr, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Morning. Is it okay if I take this off?
Yes.
Morning. Thank you for having me here today and giving me a chance just to talk with you briefly about some of our opportunities in front of us with the ESSER 3 funding allocation. If I could just give you a little bit of context first. So I've been here I'm going into my third week now, officially. Did a little bit of work prior to coming on board to try to get ready. But I've spent those 3 weeks talking to folks inside the agency and outside. I've had regional meetings with some of the academic leaders across the state in some of those regions, as well as some superintendents. And so we've had conversations about kind of the strategic deployment of these funds. So this is really what could amount to as a once in a generation opportunity for us to think strategically how to use these funds in ways that move education forward in this state for generations of students to come. So what we've proposed here is essentially a 2-year look at the funding. So as you likely know, ESSER 3 carries about $350 million. And so we have not budgeted out $350 million. We're looking at about $250 million. And we're thinking about the next 2 years. And so what does that look like? Well, for us, it's really about building out the services and capacities inside of the department. There's a lot of work that's happening here that I think not everyone realizes or knows about, that we need to, in fact, scale up to be able to deploy it effectively throughout the state. And so you'll see some of that there, including some of the specialized instructional support like social emotional learning program and resources. I had a great conversation yesterday about SEL with Beth Rice, and we have districts throughout the state who are already integrating social emotional learning support, but we could certainly build out those supports so that they reach more children. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's not really, when we think about learning recovery is not just academic. Learning recovery is bigger than that. It is about social emotional health and well-being for children. And so we have to think about the relationships that teachers are building on the front end so that they can better reach students on the back end. And so if we're going to be successful, it's really about integrating these two things. We also need to think about large-scale pilots in the state. And so, with this kind of funding, we have an opportunity to expand out and look at things like high-impact tutoring. I heard recently that there is a great model of this happening in Union County. And so it would be good for us to go and look and see exactly how Superintendent Houlihan is doing that, Dr. Houlihan is doing that. And so can we then help expand that work, perhaps not only within Union County, but throughout North Carolina? And so thinking about large scale pilots that we can collect data and look for some of these really promising practices. And then additionally, I had a conversation with Dr. Stegall, and there's been a foundation now laid for developing a repository of promising practices. So we already know some things that are happening across the state, and we need an opportunity to be able to share those and further build out that database so that in the long term, we really are creating this comprehensive one-stop shop for districts. And so districts can contact the agency and we can act as a true support organization. And they say, look, I need help with credit recovery, or I need help with dropout prevention. And so we have a team here who can say, well, looking at your district and your challenge, we know that there are other districts who look like you to some degree. And these are some promising practices that we can support you in as you try to put those in place. And so thinking about this funding in terms of 2 years, the third year then gives us an opportunity to collect data, to find programs that work well, and then to support and scale those further. And so this is not a list of things that we are asking now for you to approve funding for. These are some ideas, some things that we have talked about inside of the agency and outside, things that we think would be good investments going forward. But certainly this list can grow and this list can shrink. So with that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Yes.
Thank you,
Dr. Oxenberg.
Superintendent Truitt. I do have, I had the opportunity this past week to actually look, hadn't looked at one of these in quite a while, but I took a peek at a lesson plan. And within that lesson plan was a set amount of time, which kind of troubles me in a way, but I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. Kind of troubled me because it had 15 minutes set aside for SEL. Okay. In my mind, I don't think that's the vision we have, but I know how teachers are approaching it. They've heard about SEL, social emotional learning, and they're treating it in a very concrete way. It's important. I must do something with it to help my students. Therefore, without any, I suppose, or lack of guidance on how it fits in the span of a day or over a year or in the lives of students, it becomes a thing in a lesson plan. So what are we going, how can we mitigate?
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with you. I think, right, so we share a background in higher ed and in teacher ed in particular, oftentimes you'd see new standard come along and all of a sudden you need a course in this, right? And we want to get away from that model. I think integration is the key. That was part of the conversation we had yesterday, is how do we help teachers prepare to integrate SEL support so it doesn't become a standalone add-on. As you probably know, HB 82 is making its way. It's on the governor's desk. So summer school, within that bill, there is a requirement to integrate social emotional services. And so we are working so that once we have the guidance document available, it links to resources so that districts then can help better prepare teachers for integration. But I think that's a longer part of the conversation and a longer piece of the work in terms of how do we better prepare. And in fact, I think one of the great opportunities that personally I have is being able to sit on a number of these different Polaris committees and hear the overlap and then be able to try to make connections between them. So for example, there was some work being done. We talked a little bit about micro-credentialing. So as the vice chair of Pepsi, I'm also working on one of the subcommittees there. And we've begun the conversation of micro-credentialing for teacher advancement and development. We've had conversations here about micro-credentialing. In my conversation yesterday about SEL, there was a conversation that talked about micro-credentialing for teachers with SEL. So I think there are lots of connections that are going to happen in the very near future with all of these different pieces of work, but then again, pushing towards this as integration and not add-on with a number of these services.
Even SEL could work through student support services, through the counseling departments, and
yes, absolutely.
That's good to hear.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Superintendent Truitt. Thank you for your work and appreciate how you've hit the ground running. Is there a timeline for when you would bring to the board proposed budgetary items for the breakdown of the various ESSER 3 funding priorities and a little more detail in terms of these are extremely important funds to the future of our state?
Yes. So at the current moment, so we are I'm an office of 2 at this point. And so we are hoping to bring on a research director soon. and perhaps one or two additional staff. So we are working right now to try to finalize the guidance document in advance of HB 82. And so that's been priority number one, is how do we get that ready so that districts have the appropriate amount of time, because they've not been given a lot of time to get ready for summer school. As soon as we can finish that, which I'm expecting to be this week or early next week, then we'll begin to move into some of these other priorities. So my estimation is probably early fall is when we would have proposed budgets. We have a committee inside of the department that includes the senior leadership. So it's not as though the Office of Learning Recovery is deciding how we are spending these funds. That we need to set up a process, a policy, and a set of processes so that we can have proposals brought to that group inside the agency. We can then talk with the superintendent, see how that aligns with priorities, and then bring that to you. So I would prefer that we fully vet it inside the agency prior to bringing anything to you for consideration.
This is Mr. Ford, Matt. Be allowed to ask a question briefly?
Please, Mr. Ford.
All right, Superintendent Truitt, thank you so much for this presentation. Had to say it's really expansive. It's clear like you've been super thoughtful, and the folks you have engaged in each of the committees. I'm wondering, how concrete are these committees? Is there still opportunity for folks to be added? Is it still in flux, or is it pretty much in stone at this moment?
Well, I wouldn't say that they're in flux. I think the work that you've seen presented today, and there's a lot more that I could have shared today that's taken place, but just for elements of time did not include, but are preparing to share all of the specific goals, objectives, and metrics that the groups have worked on. So more work, I would say, has taken place than what you're seeing here presented today. I would say that there's always a little wiggle room, but it would definitely be on a case-by-case basis, and we're certainly happy to entertain any suggestions that you may have.
Thanks for that answer. I ask because I think that there's an opportunity, particularly when I look at some of the composition of the various committees and so forth. I look at the human capital one, and I instantly think, as you mentioned, about the Leandro recommendations, which also, urge us to, of course, diversify the teaching profession, and the outside DPI partners. I think there's a huge opportunity in the space to engage those in the post-secondary space, our higher ed institutions, and more specifically, our HBCUs, 9 of which have schools of education. I think that'd be a tremendous opportunity. So that was the nature of the question. Just wanting to see if this is still being formulated and to what degree.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And we will, when you see the full scope of the work, and there will be another opportunity to weigh in concerning, so for example, there could be with that work, one of the goals would be to engage with the HBCUs. And so while it may not be reflected in the work group itself, it's reflected in the work plan. But certainly if we're missing key individuals, we want to rectify that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent Truitt, it's Matt Bristow-Smith.
Yes, sir.
Just like Mr. Ford, I want to echo how much I'm grateful for the thoughtfulness of this presentation, and grateful just for the overarching vision. That it's really clear that a tremendous amount of work has gone into this, and it will move our state forward. No doubt about it. Fully implemented, Operation Polaris is going to make a meaningful impact upon North Carolina. So I, for one, am extremely excited about the next 4 years, and I want to say that. Also want to say, Superintendent Truitt, that last November, the board advisors, Mariah, Maureen, Keisha, Dr. Jackson, Tony, and myself, that we wrote a letter, an open letter to superintendent candidates. This was prior to the election, you might remember it. And we asked that our superintendent candidates, once elected, commit to three big things. And one of those was putting children first. And throughout every presentation you've made to the board since your election, you have repeatedly discussed each child, every child, all children. And I wanted to just elevate how grateful we are that laced into all of your work is this commitment to children and to equity. Not surprised by that, just fully gratified that is front and center in all of your work and in all of your public comments. We'd also challenged our candidates to be an equity warrior, thinking specifically about groups that have been marginalized in the past and designing so much of the work of the agency and also the policy recommendations you bring to the board around students that have been traditionally marginalized, underserved by public education, many of those living in tier one, high poverty, often rural counties. And so I'm grateful that the team that you have assembled and the people that you're surrounding yourself with that are informing this work reflect those priorities, as do you. And I wanted to just acknowledge that. And then the last of our three big priorities in that article that we wrote was about leading for change, just acknowledging where we are and leading for change. Gosh, who knew that you would have a pandemic to deal with upon your opening months as our superintendent, but leading forward, we're not stuck in the pandemic and we're not treading water trying to get through that. We are in fact leading for, that graduate profile that you discussed and the K-12 outcomes that we want to achieve for each and every child. So I wanted to just, express a vote of confidence in Operation Polaris and the team you've assembled and the work of the agency, the work of the board. And, this is my next to last meeting as an advisor to the state board. My 2-year term ends next month. And I didn't want to miss this opportunity to say how excited I am about the next 4 years. So thank you so much for this.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Bristow Smith, for the vote of confidence. It is not to be taken lightly that an advisor to this board has expressed that vote of confidence, and I certainly appreciate the specificity of your comments. Thank you so much for your service. Other questions? So am I turning to you or Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Truitt. We're going to briefly delay the community affairs and legislative update in order to get to some guest speakers that are part of our next agenda item. But before we do so, I'd like to echo Mr. Bristow Smith's comments and express directly to our superintendent my confidence in this vision called Operation Polaris. It reminds me of the charge the governor gave us on March 14th of last year to minimize the impact of COVID on our students. It's also entirely in line with our state's strategic plan for K-12 education. It's in line with the board's priorities, including supporting district and school transformation and our recently filed Leandro plan. It's in line with all of those and is a great way to operationalize those goals into practice in our classrooms every day. But more importantly, I think it captures our shared vision that all North Carolinians have around educating our children. And so I want to express my confidence in your plan and the work ahead, and we look forward to recommendations coming from your team on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
We'll now proceed to our remaining committee reports, and I remind our committee chairs in the audience that all voting on consent agenda items will be done at the end of our meeting via roll call. We'll now proceed to our Educator Standards and Practice Committee, led by Dr. Olivia Oxendine. Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you, Chair Davis. It's my pleasure to introduce item 1 as part of the ES&P agenda for this month. But first, before I do that, I've got to acknowledge Amy White, who works with me closely as part of the leadership of this committee. And go back to item 1, which is a new business item. We have 3 new business items on the part of my agenda for this month. The first item, I want to build a little bit of context around this item. If you recall, last year, we had the honor of hearing a presentation expanding our knowledge about the concept of micro-credentials. Making that presentation was Governor Bev Perdue, and joining her was Myra Best and also a team of educators from Rowan Salisbury School System. Actually, it was my first kind of experience with understanding or hearing much about micro-credentials. And the more I listened to that presentation, the more I saw possibilities in all the work that we do around teacher licensure and recruiting teachers and keeping teachers and making sure that they are always at the top of their game, especially once they reach the middle and later years of their careers. So coming back to us today is Governor Bev Perdue and Myra Best, and they're going to take us a bit further in this discussion around micro-credentials. If you also recall, they invited the State Board of Education and the Department of Public Instruction to join them as partners in this important work, and we agreed to do so. And since that time, we've had sections and divisions within the department who are also engaged in the work of micro-credentialing to work very closely with the governor and with Ms. Best in that work. So they're here today again to take us further in that discussion and to give us an opportunity to ask questions, make comments, and imagine how this idea fits into the current work that we're doing around rethinking teacher licensure, that entire pathway from the beginning to all the way through the 30 years, as I call it, and imagining ways this work can, and it will, ways that it can fit into the work of the important work of the Roundtable on Human Capital. So at that point, I will turn to our presenters for the day.
Governor Perdue. Good morning. Thank you for letting us be there. I don't know if Lieutenant Governor Robinson's there or not, but if he is, good morning. Superintendent Truitt and Treasurer Falwa, I just got a letter from you. I appreciate it. And Chairman Davis and Vice Chairman Duncan, and to all the members of this board, I'm delighted to be able to talk with you a little bit about this morning. As I listened to State Superintendent Truitt's presentation on Operation Polaris, I had this little tinge of regret and wished I were sitting there among you all, because I think her vision and the direction the department's going, coupled with the leadership of Governor Cooper and his education team, means that there are great things in store for the teachers and education leadership and the children of North Carolina. So Catherine, congratulations. I'm delighted that you're there and look forward to working with you all. And so I think it's appropriate that we bring the micro-credentials report to you, because if you are poised in a direction for change and for a bit of risk-taking, then this micro-credential report will speak to that. For those of you who might not remember, last year about this time before COVID, the state board and the nonprofit that I founded years ago, DigiLearn, embarked on a partnership in North Carolina to figure out a way that we could help teachers, support teachers actually, by supporting their development through a really robust system of teacher professional learning. Our goal, the goal of the committee, was to evolve professional learning, just change it a little bit to encourage compliance through seat time into a model, into the new model, because the old model encouraged compliance, into this new model that looks at competency and demonstrates timely knowledge and growth to help them in their classroom immediately and to also help their career. We, as a group, looked at integrating micro-credential policies and practices into North Carolina's learning system. They're simply they're being done all over the state. And that's part of the issue that will be addressed today if you want to go forward in the work. Their digital micro-credentials are a digital form of currency certification that indicates demonstrated competency or mastery of a specific skill or set of skills. It's a simple vehicle for delivering effective professional learning in real time for the teacher and developing, recognizing, and retaining strong teachers. I think if we do this work, I know if we do the work, because there's interest all over the country, that North Carolina will once again become a national leader in moving forward where the country is in terms of education and kids. We'll be the first state to integrate micro-credential standards with criteria from credentialing agencies and model policy. This can change professional learning. I was a teacher years ago, and I remember how odd or hard it was to have to do something that was picked by the system or picked by someone else. And so I believe if we can move it down and encourage personalized, competency-based, relevant professional learning tied to the standards and the school and district rules, we'll find increased attainment for our students and perhaps an increase in longevity of teacher service. We, DigiLearn and the state board, partnered with national workers and leaders to do this work. RTI, New America, Digital Promise, Bloom Board, the Learning Policy Institute, NEA were all part of the partnership for micro-credentials. We've identified several elements in state and local policy and practice that appear to be preventing implementation of micro-credentials in an effective way. So we'll show you those in this report. And then there are some recommendations on how we move forward if you decide to integrate micro-credentials into teacher learning. We've done this through national research, through a state feasibility study, through myriad focus groups and a statewide survey of educators and educational leaders. Y'all, this is good work. As we present our findings and preliminary recommendations to you, I look forward to hearing the discussion. I'm excited that North Carolina can perhaps become the leader in this work nationally recognized, and that we can really transform how teachers teach and how they learn and how students learn. I'm going to turn this over to the people who know what they're talking about doing this work. Terry Holliday, chairman of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards and a member of the partnership, and Myra Best, DigiLearn's executive director. And again, I look forward to working with you all and moving forward as a sliver of Polaris. Myra, Terry.
Thank you, Governor. It was indeed an honor to serve on the task force. As a former local superintendent in North Carolina and a former state superintendent in Kentucky, I very well know how important it is to get stakeholders together and make sure that you're covering the broad expanse of opinions out there amongst educators and others. And Governor Perdue did a masterful job leading the group, and Myra Best always does a terrific job in organizing and make sure the group stayed on task. The report you have comes out, even though we did have a year or more of impact by COVID, the group did a terrific job working. Hats off to all the committee members, RTI, New America for the research, and a special thanks to the funders, the Belk Endowment, the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. You know, as a former superintendent, teacher, state superintendent, COVID has shown us the real need for online, just-in-time professional learning services that are linked to improving teacher skills tied to improving student learning. And that's exactly what this report enables North Carolina to once again lead the nation in this type of work. On behalf of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, let me congratulate North Carolina on your continued leadership and focus on having a highly qualified, effective teacher in every classroom. North Carolina has been and will always be the leader in the number of National Board certified teachers. National Board has been very interested in micro-credentials linked to improving student learning and linked to the advancement of teachers in the roles that North Carolina has been leading with advanced levels of teaching. So we're very delighted to look forward to continue working with the governor, Myra, and all the North Carolina DPI folks and the Board of Education in enhancing micro-credentials across this nation. This time I'll turn it over to Myra to wrap up with recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday. I'm going to begin with the fact that North Carolina is positioned to lead. A lot of the work that we've done at this point in time is extensive. There are extensive reports and data that you have that you can reference, and I encourage you to take advantage of those through New America's organized work. I think one of the key pieces to this, Governor Perdue mentioned, is the fact that North Carolina is positioned to lead on micro-credentials. And we know this because we took the time to do the asset analysis and feasibility study for the state of North Carolina, and looking and also getting feedback from stakeholders, teachers, local board members, superintendents, and principals. So what we know is that teachers are interested in micro-credentials. They've made that very clear, and that has only been heightened by the fact of the experience we've had with COVID. And there's also a huge focus or a huge interest in the competency, achieving competency instead of seat time. And there is a need for personalized, flexible learning that aligns with not only teacher schedules, but with their needs. So that they have the time and can focus on individual skills that they need to accomplish. As we've done our work and it's included in our recommendations, you will see that we are recommending state-led micro-credentials and the need to start small and stay focused on the experienced teacher who already has a set of skills that enables them to work independently, rather than focusing on beginning teachers who are already overwhelmed learning how to be a teacher. But by starting small with a state-led initiative, we can identify certain areas that are of priority interest to the board and to the superintendent, so that we can increase the chance of success of implementing a competency-based approach, which is very different than the seat time that we're currently utilizing. And it also gives us a chance to monitor and evaluate implementation so that we can make the policy changes that we need to make to move forward. So to begin with our recommendations, our first recommendation is to ask the State Board of Ed to authorize the development of a state-led micro-credentials initiative as recommended by DigiLearn and the Partnership for Micro-Credentials. And again, that is to help move toward incorporating micro-credentials into an already robust system that we have for professional learning. But it begins to expand that to look at skills and knowledge that improves the achievement of all students, not just seat time. The second recommendation that we put forward is to endorse the Partnership for Micro-Credentials work, and that includes the report, the national report by New America, as well as the state level report by RTI, because again, these are core documents that already provide you the data and the information that we need that would enable us to develop a strategic roadmap for micro-credentials. And that we also would encourage you to continue the partnership with DigiLearn and the North Carolina Partnership, because we've already amassed knowledge and working with the department and the state board support for this work to move it forward. We're also asking that you authorize the development of a strategic roadmap. Whenever you create a massive change such as this, incorporating micro-credentials, you do need to have a real specific roadmap that would include compensation, role, have very clear specific actions, timelines, and budgets, because this is in addition to what you're already doing as an agency and board. And that should also include a strong research and evaluation. And we are suggesting that that plan be done no later than October of 2021, so that you have a complete roadmap on how to initiate this work. And we felt that it was very important as a state-led effort that the roadmap should include the State Board of Ed priorities and target experienced teachers. And as you can see through the list that we provided here, is to focus on early literacy. That's already, the board has already approved this framework, that you should start first with that. And also, as we look at the early reading, it integrates with the plan for science of reading to consider micro-credentials for middle and high school teachers to further integrate into the content areas, so that we begin to get the literacy across the entire spectrum of teachers. Another priority area would be to focus on the demonstration of skills necessary for remote and digital learning that we know is aligned already with the North Carolina Digital Learning Plan. It's only become more important as we have dealt with the situation around COVID. The other area of priority, which also goes back to aligns with the pathways that Dr. mentioned, is a set of state-designed approved descriptions for advanced teaching roles using the data from the current advanced teaching roles grantees. And the goal again would be to begin to look at how micro-credentials can be used for career advancement as a phased-in approach, so that teachers can be compensated and remain in the classroom. And as a part of that, to focus again on the experienced teacher, to have sufficient and equitable funding so that it can be taken advantage of across the state, that we have the portability in all the districts across the state, and a governance model that includes equitable and sufficient support to all LEAs so they can implement the micro-credentials, as well as establishing the standards for micro-credentials for quality control that is not in place at the present time anywhere in the country. The other recommendation that the board needs to consider, and can begin to consider now, is to review policies related to license renewal and professional learning. At the present time, the board approved CEUs as license renewal, and what we are looking at is asking how the board can incorporate recognition of specific state-led micro-credentials as an approval for license renewal, and what that might look like. What's happening now is districts are giving rates fundamentally opposite of what competency-based is about. So we need to be clear about what competency-based credentials are and recognize those for acquiring those particular skills. And the last recommendation is to further develop the advanced teaching roles, so that as a strategy to provide career advancement for teacher leaders, so they can have increased compensation while remaining. At the current time, you have you need to increase the number of districts so you can increase your research base, so that you can begin to develop the skills needed as teacher leaders. And also not to lose sight of the point that Dr. Holliday made, and you'll see this also in the recommendations, is that the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards is the forerunner of competency-based learning for teachers. It's much more robust than micro-credentials, and micro-credentials are more narrowly defined. But again, you already have a pool of research that you can work from to begin to identify teacher leadership. And with that, I defer back to you, Chairman Oxendine, for any questions you have.
Thank you ever so much for this fine presentation. And I must apologize to Dr. Holliday. I did not name him as one of the presenters. So welcome. And it's very, very useful to hear your insights. Well, a couple of things I've heard that I really like, North Carolina being number one, being a leader. And we certainly will all agree to that. And I believe what you have presented to us today and the various recommendations that you have put forth will take us to that place and get us there on time. Let me just open up the floor to questions or comments from my colleagues before I add a couple of other comments myself. Any thoughts? Ms. Candace?
Yes, I really enjoyed the presentation, and as one of the folks who was involved with the Human Capital Roundtable work and moving those recommendations through the board into Pepsi, where they sit right now, I see this work meshing beautifully with some of the concepts that I suspect are going to come out of the working groups in Pepsi right now. So micro-credentials are certainly something that the roundtable considered as a part of our measure of teacher effectiveness and teacher growth and development. So this seems very timely with the other work that we're doing.
Thank you, Ms. Kamnitz. Other comments or questions? In reality and virtual members? What I would propose that we do is work very closely with the superintendent and the committees that we've already formed around the human capital work, and take these recommendations to those groups and begin thinking how we can marry them and mesh them with the current work that is going on. They're fine recommendations, and the more we streamline and make things more robust, I think we'll come out with a better product for our teachers and for our school systems and for the state of North Carolina, and certainly have the three of you at the table helping us think through this work, because it's robust work, it's complex work, and it's great work. And I'm very, very thrilled that we engaged in the partnership with you last year, and we certainly look forward to a continued partnership. Any other thoughts or questions? Oh, Mr. Chair Davis.
Yes, Dr. Oxendine, I just want to endorse your recommendation. I think that's exactly the way we approach this terrific opportunity that DigiLearn has brought to us, is to refer it to our superintendent for engagement through the Human Capital Operation Polaris model that you described, as well as the Human Capital Roundtable that Ms. Kamnitz presented. Governor Perdue, Dr. Holliday, and Executive Director Best, I just want to thank you for being such great partners with us and bringing your commitment and your expertise and your creativity to this effort. We clearly need to support our teachers with helping them grow and develop as they help our students grow and develop. And what you've brought us is a great opportunity that we look forward to our superintendent bringing us recommendations on. Thank you, Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you.
Dr. Oxendine, this is Bev Perdue. We want to thank you and the board for your leadership and for allowing us to be your partner. And again, congratulations on Operation Polaris. It sounds really cool. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
We will move on to item 2, another new business item, and I will shift to Ms. Brenda Berg and Ms. Leah Sutton, who will present to us on Teach NC. Again, this fits in so nicely with the work that we're doing with licensure and Human Capital Roundtable. We're going to hear from them today on where they stand in the area of recruitment, what has happened in the first year of this project, how it happened, and what is next in terms of the future with Teach NC. This dovetails perfectly with Goal 3, which is about making sure that we have the best prepared educators in our classrooms in our schools by 2025. And so we look forward to this presentation that is about to begin.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. I appreciate that. Good morning, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, Lieutenant Governor Robinson, and all the members of the board. We appreciate you having us back. As you may recall, we presented on Teach NC about a year ago. We're thrilled to present you with an update after our first full year of findings. And so today we're going to cover, as Dr. Oxendine mentioned, Goal 3, and also cover the sort of where we've been, where we're going, the progress this year, which has been actually nothing short of remarkable. I heard Dr. Oxendine say she loves hearing that we are #1, and yes, again, we are #1 on teacher recruitment, and I'll get to some of that data in a moment. As any of you who know Brenda Berg and Best MC, we are very data oriented, so we'll be talking about a lot of numbers, but I do want to remind you that these are people. These are extraordinary people, often teacher candidates who have really felt blocked from the profession for various reasons. And so each and every one of these numbers are folks who have said, I'm interested in being in this profession. And we're really thrilled that Teach NC is removing the barriers that have existed for so many teacher candidates. I'm happy to move Dr. Townsend-Smith to slide 3. As you may recall, Teach NC is a teacher recruitment platform and a media campaign designed to increase the quantity, quality, and diversity of the teacher workforce in North Carolina. Teach NC has been designed around the user, specifically focused on capturing the kinds of candidates that we've traditionally been losing in our pipeline and removing barriers for those candidates. When we began this work, I can move to the next slide, we identified a few critical reasons why we are losing these candidates and made that the focus of our efforts. Take, for example, one of the candidates we met along the way. When we first started talking with her, she had all kinds of misconceptions about the teaching profession, from how much it paid to what kind of degree she needed to have to get licensed. She simply couldn't find clear and direct information that answered her questions. And she was a student in a UNC system school, had asked for advice within the school and really couldn't get the information that she needed from one place. And she also had questions just about the teaching experience. Would she like it? Would she be good at it? Would all of her kind of the fears and questions that anyone has when entering a new profession. And Teach NC provided her with all of that she needed. She was able to get those questions answered, but more importantly, she got one-on-one support from actual North Carolina teachers who were able to talk with her about the experience of being a teacher. One of those candidates actually helped her find a TA job. So she came into the school system and tried on teaching as a TA in a school system, and discovered, guess what? She was really very talented. Everyone around her could tell that she was a natural born teacher. And she pursued, she also had to get help figuring out how to transition from her undergraduate degree in forensics to actually a teaching license. And so she was able to get one-on-one support with that. And then thirdly, she was able to get one-on-one support because she wanted to find a job, and she was very flexible anywhere in the state, and she kept looking at one district and then another district, and then the jobs board came online. And she went to the jobs board, and within, I think, 2 weeks, she had a job teaching science in middle school. Here we have a great example of, in less than 18 months, she went from I'm interested but scared and not sure to actually being in a classroom teaching students and enrolled in an EPP to supplement her undergraduate degree. And now she's a middle school teacher in Pitt County. So again, these are people that have been really impacted by the work, and it's not just one piece of it. It's this entire concept of being very intentional about recruiting our teachers. So to frame the work that we're doing, I just wanted to remind some of the goals that we have. One is to just create this comprehensive hub, but in an interim step, we really want to change the public perception, and my colleague Leah Sutton will talk a little bit about how we're doing that. And then by 2025, already be significantly filling vacancies in hard-to-staff schools and subjects, and with the ultimate goal, of course, to improve, have a measurable impact on student achievement. Next slide. So here's a quick roadmap of how we got here. In 2018, we really engaged the education cabinet and other education groups around the state to make sure this is something that we all agreed that we needed to do. We received letters of support from all these key stakeholders, and we were able to raise funds for a public-private partnership that launched in 2019. The actual website and campaign was launched in August of 2019, which means that as of the end of last summer, we were able to have 1 year of implementation. And in 2020, I want to add that we were able to add that jobs board that I mentioned And we were able to add that because the DPI Business Systems Modernization team used this as Superintendent Truitt just talked about the North Star, used Teach-NC as a North Star and a reason to put that jobs board in place and get it going, frankly, years faster than any of us would have hoped for otherwise. So it's really been a catalyst for other work to happen. And then this year, we are continuing to expand the website, the landing pages. You'll hear more about that in a bit. And a new PSA is being launched. But I would like to remind you that this was a 3-year runway. In those conversations in 2018, we were very clear that we were going to raise funds from the private sector, matched with some funds from DPI to create this 3-year runway. It was never intended to be sustained outside of the state, that this should be a state-run initiative, and that runway is ending at the end of this year. So I just want to really reiterate that that's sort of in the next steps. So how are we doing? I'm going to show you, these are some images of the website, but I'll give you some quick numbers. We had in that very first year, those 12 months, over 80,000 web visitors and almost 5,000 emails captured, meaning people who said, I'm interested in becoming a teacher and engaged in the system. In that process, we had over 1,300 educator preparation programs applications completed. And the advising calls that I mentioned with actual teachers was almost 600. And we created mid-year an online chat because there was such a demand for one-on-one support. And in just that first, I guess it was about 5 or 6 months with the online chat, we had over 900 one-on-one online chats. So as far as our results, our goal for that first year, based on how other states and other parts of the country could do, was 225. We are still counting, and we are at 675 candidates converting to either entering an educator preparation program or actually coming into residency, like the young woman that I mentioned to you before, so actually coming straight into the profession. That is 3 times our goal. And importantly, the makeup of these candidates is very important. We found that 46.5% of the applicants are actually candidates of color. We also found that when we asked them what they plan on teaching, the vast majority want to teach in our hardest to staff subjects. So a lot of STEM and special education interest, way above 55% of the candidates were interested in that field. So we're really getting to that audience that we had hoped to get to. One more slice of the metrics. Again, our target was 235. We currently are at 675 candidates. We have all of the ed prep programs in the state on the website, and we are progressing toward our goal of having all of the LEAs. They're all listed on the website, but having every single district in the state have their own opportunity to pitch their school district. That will be effective, I believe, this summer, that we'll have them all on board. And one more set of metrics before we move on. I wanted to show where we're going this year. So you saw where we did our first year. Well, this last quarter versus the same quarter last year, our numbers are trending at 3 times where they were a year ago. So we're only continuing to increase, and our aspirations are very, very high for this initiative. I'm extremely excited about it, and I think it's just such evidence that removing barriers can have an extraordinary result. So I want to turn this over at this moment to my colleague, Leah Sutton, who's going to share a little bit more about those PSA campaigns and some more lessons that we've learned along the way.
Great. Thanks, Brenda. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today. So our first PSA campaign with Teach-NC was the Better Work Stories campaign. And this campaign was really designed to illustrate how complex, challenging, and rewarding teaching is, that it's a really multifaceted profession for folks with all kinds of different skill sets. And so this is a quick look at our performance over the last year or so with this campaign. These were donated spots, so we had to sort of go out and get folks to donate time for this campaign. And we had some really great reach. over this last year, particularly in an election year where our airwaves are very crowded. Being a swing state that we are, we had some really good traction, especially in some of our smaller markets, so we're really pleased with this. But I'm really excited to tell you about our next campaign. You can go to the next slide for us. This campaign, well, we have a video that is linked in your attachments on eBoard, and we hope that you will take just a minute. It's 60 seconds to watch this new ad. The campaign is titled "Teachers Shape the Future." It's going to launch in the next couple of weeks. We're working with the DPI team, communications team, on launching this wide across our state, and hopefully you'll see it on your TV or hear it on your radio sometime later this year. But this campaign was really designed around this moment of COVID and just the incredible contribution that our teachers are making towards just the lives and well-being of our students across the country and across our state. And so we just think this is a super compelling ad campaign, and so we look forward to launching it soon, and hope that you will take a look into the link in your attachments at this video when you get a second. We can go to the next slide. This past year, as we've been working, we've also been really engaging and building out the site and doing lots of things to improve upon Teach-N-See and to grow the effort. And so on the left side of this slide, you'll see things that we've done added to teachnc.org. So these are things we're working on the web platform that will be available to everyone. We have new landing pages for teaching fellows, Teach for America, Troops to Teachers. We have a great landing page that illustrates the ways that folks can get licensed through the community college system, sort of starting with those associate's degrees and then going on to get fully licensed with a bachelor's degree. We're building out now the remaining LEA profiles, so that Brenda mentioned every single LEA will have a personal profile that will sort of explain what's special about their district and why someone might want to go work there. And then we're also working on a hub of resources and supports for Black educators, and sort of getting at that effort to diversify the profession, and more to come for Hispanic educators and bilingual educators. On the right-hand side, you'll see just some ways that we're engaging our partners. So we're working on some high school interest surveys that are going out to high school students to gauge whether or not they have interest in the teaching profession, and then connect them with Teach-N-See. Same thing for non-licensed staff. Those are going out through our LEA partners. We're sending out welcome and introduction to Teach-N-See kits to our high school counselors. We've increased the number of scholarships we've been able to provide to folks who have applied to educator prep programs this year. So we're just constantly in conversation with these partners and trying to think of ways to continue to engage across the state in recruitment. Next slide, Deanna. So as we close out this presentation, we just wanted to share with you some things we've learned about recruitment. You know, we at SNC just feel that recruitment is just so important and urgent. We really can't wait on recruitment. We need to work on this and make this a priority now. And so what we have learned through our work with Teach-N-See and our conversations with partners and candidates is that there's quite a lot of interest in the teaching profession. You know, we have 7,000 folks subscribed and getting regular communication about teaching in just a little over a year. And so we really need to cultivate that interest and capture it. And what we have found is that about 2/3 of our subscribers already have a bachelor's degree. So when you're talking about candidates who aren't going through the traditional EPP pathway, like, you know, high school to undergrad and then into teaching, they need more support. They have more questions about, how do I get into this? How do I get licensed? And so that's where Teach-N-See is really a great asset, because it's providing that support. Our subscribers are also telling us those one-on-one conversations, the chat function, the talk to a teacher, those are highly rated as supports that actually take someone from being interested to applying to an educator prep program. We are regularly having conversations with our EPP partners and LEA partners, and there's so much recruitment work going on. It's just really impressive to see how much effort is out there to get teachers into our pipeline. But what we haven't had until Teach-N-See is the connective tissue to bring all those things together, to leverage all the existing efforts and multiply our impact. And so Teach-N-See is bringing that connective tissue to the recruitment landscape across our state. And lastly, Brenda talked a little bit about the jobs board. This is an innovation that we had hoped for. Other regions that use the teach.org platforms don't have a job board. This is something that we had really hoped for. And Dr. Spano at DPI and the Business Systems Modernization team really made this happen. And what we found is removing the uncertainty about where the jobs are and what kind of jobs are available has been a huge driver in our traffic, our subscribers, and this is the innovation that we can come together and think of these ways to improve this resource, and it's really making a difference for candidates. We have a vision for a licensure wizard where candidates can come and insert whatever their education credentials and background are, and then it kind of gives you personal response to what you might need to get licensed. And that's another innovation that we think, we can keep pressing forward on these innovations and make this resource even stronger. So as we think back over, we look back sort of our 3-year startup runway is ending. And so we just wanted to leave you with a couple of next steps. We can go ahead to the next slide. Brenda's mentioned our startup runway ends in November. And so we are hoping to transition TeachNC, looking forward to transitioning TeachNC to DPI, where we think it can be a really critical part of the state's efforts to strengthen the teacher pipeline. We think DPI is a natural place for it. And so we are just looking forward to that transition and supporting that transition in the coming months. And we also think there's an opportunity to have some sort of teacher recruitment entity or task force or group at DPI that is really, TeachNC might sit there and, that group can work with stakeholders about and set a bold vision for recruitment in our state and really be sort of a central location for these recruitment conversations. So lastly, before we open up for questions, I just wanted to thank our partners. We partnered with teach.org, who provides sort of some of the technology for this platform. The DPI team has been, Dr. Tomberlin's team and Dr. Spano's team has been absolutely critical in making this project a success, as well as our funders, the Belk Foundation, Gates Foundation, Coastal Credit Union, the Belk Endowment, James Haynes Foundation, all of North Carolina supporters who have really made this possible. So we just want to thank them for their contributions. And with that, we will open it up. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer.
Thank you ever so much. I'm sitting here thinking, I don't think, as long as I've been on the state board, I don't think that I've ever had the sense that someone was actually giving us something to the department. And this is exactly what the work that you've done for 3 years is almost like it needs a bow around it or something, because it's going to be embedded in the work of DPI. This is absolutely phenomenal. And I want to, just the two of you did all this in 3 years. It's amazing. This is good work, excellent work. I'll turn to my colleagues if you have any questions or comments or words of praise. I have written down so many notes. One of the things that comes to mind is that the lesson should be shared with our EPPs, because recruiting is so difficult, recruiting students to go into the profession of teaching. And all that you did in that 3-year runway and brought it to a good point, a good ending. Great work. We're just so delighted that you were part of our team. Thank you.
You make such a good point about the EPPs. They have been fantastic to work with, and we really appreciate Tom Tomberlin's team for making those relationships possible. And the Teach team has built a relationship with those ed prep programs. And what we're finding is that there's a reciprocity. So candidates will go to an EPP website and then get lost in all those questions we talked about, right? If an EPP actually sends those candidates to TeachNC, there's a dramatic increase in their actual applying to the program, because they're coming to TeachNC, they're getting those sort of unfiltered answers to their questions, and they're coming back and they're finishing the application. So I think the EPPs that are engaging, in that two-way relationship are seeing tremendous results, and that's starting to already, as you saw, multiply this year.
You're absolutely right, Brenda. And I think about some of the early comments that you made around how to recruit. What you found to be successful is gathering the stories from individuals and hearing some of their struggles and their questions and some of their mysteries. around teaching. So it was a personal touch that I think you brought to this, and hearing them touch and talk. That's part of the secret. Any
Madam
other?
Chair?
Yes, yes,
It's Mr. Ford.
by all means.
Excellent, thank you. Hey, Brenda. Hi, hey, Leah. How are you all? Good to see you. Thankful for the work. At the risk of sounding like a broken record here, and I think it's super encouraging to see not only how you exceeded your own internal expectations in terms of the applicants, but also your target demographic numbers, right? That's nearly half of the candidates identifying as folks of color is precisely, I think, what we're aiming for here in a worthy cause. Have you noticed anything about those 40-some% who identify as folks of color, like where they're coming from, what they've identified as their barriers to entry? Those are points of curiosity for me.
Yeah, we can't just aggregate that by their demographics, but just across the board, what we were finding and again, remember that we're partnering with a national organization called TEACH, and they've put so much effort into figuring out where those stopping points are along the way. And by far, there were two elements. There's this one is the answering questions, right? I just have questions about, I was talking to a young woman and she said, well, you know, she didn't understand how much, you know, teachers got paid and didn't know the availability of jobs. That's a very important barrier for a lot of people. The other one is the feeling of being welcomed. You know, if you think about a profession where your role models are 80% female and 80% white and maybe don't look like you, it's that sense of being welcomed. And that's, I think, one thing important about, we have 4 teachers who answer actual, you know, make schedule appointments and answer questions, and the candidates can choose which teacher they talk with. That element of feeling welcomed into the profession, I think, is incredibly important and something that we forget. Oftentimes that teacher in some parts of our state is the only 4-year college educated person you meet, right? And if they don't look like you, there's a disconnect there. So I think that was definitely one piece we found, and having that one-on-one connection with an actual teacher, I think, is something that we can't understate the value of.
Thank you.
We appreciate your work, and we will stay in touch and look forward to other good things coming from your groups.
Our pleasure. Thank you for your partnership.
Thank you. And that will go on to the third item under new business, which is the driver education student curriculum update. And this is going to be brought to us by Mr. Carl Logan and Ms. Tanya Easterwood. As you recall, this work is stemming from a study that was done by the Office of State Budget and Management, and that was the result of Session Law 2010-31. One of the big pieces that has resulted from all of that is a driver education strategic plan, as well as a digital standardized curriculum. So today we will hear an update, a little bit more information about the status of curriculum development. Mr. Logan.
Dr. Dennis Taylor and I wanted to give a quick introduction to Carl Logan before he starts. This presentation again will give recommendations and updates on changes to the driver education curriculum as you've shared. I think in particular the current pandemic has revealed the importance that a digital curriculum can serve. And so we're really excited about the research and work that they put into this presentation. So I want to turn it over to Carl Logan and his entire team. They've worked hard and diligently to research and prepare these recommendations for today's board members. Mr. Logan.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Lieutenant Governor Robinson, Superintendent Truitt, Treasurer Falwell, Committee Chair Dr. Oxendine and Ms. White, stakeholders and guests. I bid you a good morning from the School Nutrition District Operations Division and the driver education team. And it would certainly be an understatement that my team is very excited to be able to come back before you and share yet another milestone in our program's history. All of this while our state, country, and world has been traveling a long, dark road by experiencing the worst pandemic in 100 years. So I assure you, and some of you know firsthand, that our program has been has not been immune to the issues created by COVID-19. However, there seems to be some light on the horizon for our country, state, and our program. So included in this update today are the following items: a brief history pertaining to the program curriculum and how we arrived at this point. We will then provide you with information regarding the project management, including the pilot and feedback from the districts, the criteria used in building the curriculum, and lastly, how it flows into the grand scheme of aligning the program with appropriate state leadership initiatives. As a reminder for the board members and for those who have not seen our previous updates, this matrix has been used as our roadmap to address the many legislative requirements recommended by the 2010 OSBM study, as mentioned by Dr. Oxendine. As you can see, we have nearly completed all those. However, my team has shifted from reactive to proactive and planning for the future. By following your leadership and while employing our knowledge and expertise in the traffic safety industry. So the program is nearing its 100th anniversary, but yet we have only have a record of 3 major curriculum updates during this time. Although today's update is focused on the curriculum, it will also launch a new generation of technology-driven, continuous, and as-needed updates initiated by this agency, delivered directly to and at no cost to the districts and in a timely manner. So we completed this project ahead of schedule, and we were able to pilot it last fall. Additionally, 5 districts who participated in the pilot benefited by using the program to restart their programs during the COVID shutdown. Moving forward, this type of event will virtually have no effect on the classroom phase of our program moving forward. So now, although the entire team was highly involved every step of the way, I take pleasure in introducing 2 team members who will provide a high level of this project and design of this new digitized curriculum. Mrs. Tanya Easterwood, whose expertise ranges from local and state IT system development, educational technology, and project management. Dr. Royce Davis will follow, and she serves as our learning and development coordinator, whose expertise is in instructional design, e-learning, curriculum development, and has been involved with distance education with a private university for many years. So Mrs. Easterwood. Tanya, I believe you're muted.
I was. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Logan. At first, I want to cover this map. This is the driver education program restart map. We wanted to give an update as to where we are during the spring semester versus where we were in the fall. So currently, as you can see, we do have 1 red hard stop. We have 1 county that has not started neither behind the wheel or in classroom instruction. Our hopes are that they will begin their instruction during the summer, which is their highest enrollment time. We are in contact with the district, letting them know that we are available to assist with any questions and in any way that we possibly can to get their teachers back to teaching and their students learning. And primarily, I'm gonna stay on that slide just for a little while longer. On the map, additionally, the green states, as you can see, green means go. The rest of our state is fully implemented the behind the wheel instruction and the classroom instruction. The green states did have to, the green PSUs, they did have to establish their own curriculums to get online to accommodate the virtual learning options for their students and the behind the wheel requirements. However, our pilot group are the 5 yellow counties. And what we did with these counties, well, we had adequate interest prior to COVID. Who knew COVID would happen? And many of the green PSUs have inquired to be added to the pilot. However, we were unable to add additional counties due to the limited space that we have. Our plans, though, is to continue to assist them in any type of engagement in learning design in their counties as we approach and possibly move towards larger implementation and moving from pilot to operational status. This was our design approach as we prepare to embark on this huge endeavor. I remember when I first got here and I arrived, it was Mr. Carl Logan and Dr. Ben Matthews. As we were covering the many outstanding items, one of the questions were, how can we get this done? How quickly can we get it done without compromising quality so that we can get this to the districts? Because this was highly needed. So we all agreed on an agile approach. We just minimized some of the steps that are required in summer project management so that we can freely design what was needed. So we defined in the define and design process for phase. What we did was we reviewed the content and we obtained a user agreement from the American Driver and Traffic Safety Education Association, which is ATSEA. When reviewing that content, it was so paper driven and heavy wording. What we did was we reviewed that entire curriculum, and many of the handouts we shifted from being paper to download to interactive activities so that the majority of all the work can be done inside of the learning management system we use, which is Canvas, to assist us with data analytics down the road. So the delivery and feedback, what we have been doing is collecting formative evaluations. We got feedback throughout the process whenever we were doing the testing. And then we also did during the live pilot, we get immediate feedback from the teachers and the students. Our hopes are during the summer that we can get a curriculum improvements from our teachers so that we can make any necessary revisions prior to fall 2022. So here, Dr. Oxendine, we can honestly say we are the first state to obtain a user agreement with ATSEA and create a digital curriculum based on their 12 national standards, which you see here. These, though they're listed as our modules, they are their 12 national standards. And we do have 13. Our module 13 includes the additional information that is specific to North Carolina legislation and all the additional topics that were provided by the driver education teachers across the state based on their recommendations. So once Dr. Lynn Harvey saw all of this and she said, great job, her next thing was, how do we get immediate feedback? How do we obtain the feedback from our students and teachers? So with that being said, we implemented a anonymous course survey, and it is completed prior to the final exam in each course. So we collect the data, and then during the course offering times, as you can see, that was huge for students. We did have a lot of students that had after school jobs. Some were not at home, maybe with grandparents due to the shift with COVID. And then one of the biggest hit areas were where we have student athletes. Many times previously before, they could not take driver education due to the offering times. Well, the learning environment now allows them to attend that blended learning option online so they can do sports and complete their driver education requirement as they so desire. And just to share a few comments, here are a few comments I was able to pull from the course feedback from our students. And as you can see, they addressed some of the cons, the class environment. One was really reluctant even to learn in the online environment, but ended up really loving that. And so this just shows the large impact it has on such a small pilot at this time, but with hopes that it will grow. And this continued feedback will assist us as we continue to allow the students to give their feedback in the course. So we're giving them what they are needing in the immediate time frame. So at this time, I will now hand it over to Dr. Amelia Royster Davis.
Thank you, Ms. Easterwood. So to promote success in our online learning environment, we considered what we believe are key program components to cultivate. Those components include design, engagement, assessments, and flexibility. So I'll briefly highlight our strategies to employ in these areas. In developing this course, we wanted to organize the learning experience and design content in a way that effectively delivers information to learners. So to accomplish this, we sought out supplemental tools and of course, research best practices for online learning. Ultimately, we acquired the Design Plus tool from City Lab. It is a course offering tool that integrates with the Canvas learning management system, and it allows us to easily style and brand the content, making the course more visually appealing, all while improving accessibility. Creating accessible content is not just about making our content or our work for those with disabilities, but about providing the best experience for all. Additionally, we maintain an intuitive, clear structure by utilizing modules to chunk content. So good modules include some sort of intake and opportunities to process and demonstrate acquired new knowledge. What's missing from the slide is a GIF. So when you convert it from PowerPoint to PDF, is a GIF. And the GIF actually shows, gives you a visual of what the homepage and the modules look like within the course. So I'm sorry that is missing. To increase student engagement, we sought student volunteers to provide voiceovers for our 3D character animations. The characters are strategically placed in the first module to provide guidance as students work through the lesson. We anticipate building the 3D character feature to enhance the peer-to-peer learning and to simplify more complex information. So as Tanya has already mentioned, we are planning on collecting that feedback. We are planning for a student town hall meeting and to work those recommendations into the revision plan. And then, of course, incorporating that into the modifications to the program. So again, what's missing on this slide is a GIF of the 3D character animation. Currently, we have a male student and a female student guiding students or the learners through that module. As previously mentioned, a good module includes some sort of intake, and this occurs through reading, listening, or viewing. So the way we've created or set up the modules is that students progress through the lesson. So there is an overview page that provides them with their learning objectives and the learning activities for the module. Then there is a lesson in which the students work through using a provided note-taking guide. The lessons are further chunked into parts, and the parts include, of course, text, videos, graphics, and knowledge checks. They're given opportunities to process what they've taken in through a discussion and during live meetings with the instructor. So these are part of the module as well. And then lastly, students are required to demonstrate that they have acquired new knowledge, not only in the discussions, but in a module quiz and other activities designed by the instructor. This well-marked module structure allows a path for students to follow. The digitized curriculum allows for flexibility for pace and timing of delivery of instruction. So our instructors have opted to facilitate the course with live sessions over either a 2 or 3 week period with several sessions, as Mrs. Eastwood has mentioned, to accommodate student schedules. Students can complete activities, assignments, and assessments offline if unable to complete them during the live session. Quizzes and the final are untimed. We do allow for up to 2 attempts, and we record the higher. This increases learner motivation and enhances the learning experience. We believe cultivating the key program components, design, engagement, assessments, and flexibility has created a strong foundation for an inclusive and collaborative learning environment. And then at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Logan.
So pursuant to General Statute 115C-216, local boards are required to use the curriculum produced by DPI. So this slide somewhat gives a summary of the key areas which this digitized program and learning management system will provide. So currently we collect quarterly information, and via this platform, we look forward to more efficient and a more effective method of gathering pertinent data to ensure that we are providing the proper guidance and support. So the administrative tools in this will also enable us to establish a foundation for interagency collaboration with DMV. So anticipating success with our funding request, our staff is ready to move into the fast lane, which will allow DPI to play a role, our role more effectively in the grand scheme of traffic safety education in our state. And some of these are mentioned on this slide. I'd like to direct you to the fourth bullet, which is somewhat sums up this presentation. Mr. Brett Robinson, who is the Secretariat of the Association of National Stakeholders in Traffic Safety Education and the Executive Director of the American Driver and Traffic Safety Education Association, or ADSEA, has granted us the rights to using their nationally recognized curriculum as the foundation for the creation of ours. He states, the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction is truly leading the way in teen traffic safety education. Among their many accomplishments, the establishment of digital platforms for teen learning and teacher training programs is innovational. I regularly reference the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction as having done more than any other state to implement the Novice Teen Driver Education and Training Administrative Standards, or NTEDAS, otherwise known as the national standards, and leading the way for the traffic safety education. It is a privilege to work with the NCDPI team, and I'm proud of all that they have accomplished. So all DPI is #1 in the country in another area. So when I speak of organizational values, from the beginning, we have empowered our team members to own their area of expertise that they bring to the table, which has led us to effective group dynamics and created a highly collaborative and high-performing work culture. Additionally, if I may take just a quick moment from this presentation, the ultimate example of organizational values and leadership is our former division director, Dr. Ben Matthews. On behalf of divisions and sections, Dr. Matthews supported and nurtured while he was our leader, and since he's been retired, we want to acknowledge him today because he has helped bring driver education program back to where it belongs. Since his retirement, he has fostered new relationships and partnerships with stakeholders with the driver education program. For example, the state's Alcohol Beverage Control Commission has already contributed to our new curriculum. So students, parents, and all road users will benefit from this type of stakeholder support immediately and down the road. Chair Davis, Superintendent Truitt, we are committed to employ these team dynamics to achieve the mission, vision, and goals of this board and agency. And Dr. Oxendine and Ms. White, again, thank you both for your continued support and leadership to our team for this essential life skill for young adults.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. I'm telling you, North Carolina public education is looking really good today with all this leading the nation and this, that, and the other. Let me make sure I understand something before I turn to my colleagues for their questions, comments. Did I hear, Ms. Easterwood, did I hear you say that we are first in the nation for completing the modules? 13.
Yes, we are the first in the nation to leverage the digital curriculum and put those national standards inside of a digital content for students online. So we are the first ones with that foundation, and we've had other states reach out to us as well.
That's hard work on the part of your section and your division. I just sense that there's a lot of expertise in driver education in the area of digital content, and that's probably the reason we're #1. And we also, I heard Mr. Logan mention a statement by a national person that North Carolina is leading the way in traffic, teen traffic safety education. Is that correct?
Yes, there is a set of national standards which our entire team has been selected to update those this year, which is actually going on now. But we have led the country in the implementation of those national standards, which are quite extensive.
Marvelous. Just very, very good news. Questions, comments from my colleagues? And welcome, Dr. Robert Taylor. I heard your voice a few minutes ago. I know you from Bladen County. Welcome to the meeting and welcome to the department.
Dr. Oxendine.
So with that, I think that covers everything under new business items. We will go into the discussion items, beginning with ES&P 1, and this is going to be presented by Lee O'Neill, and it's in reference to changes in TCED 004, which is in policy. This is the licensing section that covers all things related to career technical education. Those changes for us board members are summarized very nicely in, I think it's in attachment 2. So there's just a really good summary that Lee and her staff have prepared for us. So I'll turn to Ms. O'Neill for this presentation, for this discussion item.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine, and good morning to you and Superintendent Truitt, members of the State Board. We're here today to request your support for revisions to CTED 004. We have received feedback from our CTE directors, HR directors, DPI licensure, and CTE staff throughout the year on these requested revisions, and PEPC approved the updates at their last meeting. Just as a reminder, CTE teachers are still recruited from teacher education programs, and some also pursue residency licensing in CTE areas. This particular policy governs new teachers who meet the eligibility requirements and choose an initial CTE restricted license. These initial licenses are based on related work experience, related degrees, and in many cases, industry credentials. It also governs the adding of CTE teaching and support services areas to existing licenses. In the materials, you have a draft policy, and we've added the federal reference to this policy. The federal legislation that guides CTE is the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act, or Perkins 5, as we call it. We've also included a little library of common acronyms. We're going to try really hard not to use acronyms, but it is sort of alphabet soup sometimes. So if we slip up, we do have that reference for you here. As we work to prepare this policy for the rulemaking process to establish administrative code, we've reorganized the sections and are beginning with definitions for common terms found throughout the policy. So section 1 is all new. In section 2, we retitled it to general information and just reorganized it for better understanding. We begin with the eligibility to obtain an initial CTE restricted license and state the requirements to convert to a continuing license here instead of each individual license area as we did in previous versions of this policy. We state here that to convert the initial license, the teacher must have the 18 hours defined in the definitions and the CTE new teacher induction, or complete the CTE New Teacher Training Institute, plus have any additional credentials that might be required for the license area. And those are defined for each license in section 3. Specifically, I want to bring to your attention that in section 122 of the federal legislation, we are required to provide a description of how the eligible agency will support the recruitment and preparation of teachers. We feel like our CTE New Teacher Institute will allow us to meet many of our goals in this section of our approved state plan for CTE. Last year, around this time, you allowed us to develop that program, and we think it will really help improve our recruitment and retention efforts. So we're going to change the word in the policy to maintain instead of develop. My colleague's going to share the details of that program with you on the next few slides. But also just want to call out in section 2.4, I'll be coming back to you in May. It's come to our attention that that particular section does not align with administrative code. So we'll walk that back through the process with PEPC next week. And then I'll bring it to you for action in May and catch up with all of these revisions all at once. So now it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Rob Van Dyke. He is Program Area Consultant for CTE, and he's been tasked with developing and implementing our CTE New Teacher Training Institute. So he's going to share the details of that program with you. Rob?
Good morning and almost afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to quickly go through the CTE New Teacher Institute, just so that you understand what this program actually will be doing to help recruit and retain our new teachers. So the CTE New Teacher Institute is in partnership with the Southern Regional Education Board, or SREB, and will be licensing their Teaching to Lead program. This is a new cohort program option that, as Lee said, is in lieu of those 18 semester hours for those CTE restricted licenses. It's a 2-year or 200-hour program that has integrated coaching and mentored experience for these new teachers and focuses on CTE research based from the National Research Center for CTE, or NRCTE, around instructional planning, instructional strategies, classroom management, and classroom assessment. And so these teachers that will be going through this project or this program will go through a series of different experiences. And on the next slide is a series outlines the training schedule that these teachers will go through in year 1. So they'll have some mixture of in-person and hybrid experiences, as well as online modules around all of those research-based CTE components, as well as in-building mentor from a CTE teacher, artifact creation, which includes lesson plans, teaching philosophies, classroom management plans, things that they can use inside of the classroom the very next day after the training, as well as monthly webinars by seasoned teachers. So they get information about just relevant topics related to being a CTE teacher. At the end of these 2 years, these teachers will have gone through a cohort model together and really have the skills they need to be a quality CTE teacher. The next slide is the coaching experience. This is a unique part of this program. It requires 3 classroom observations, which are more guided feedback and conversations. These will be done by the district CMIC, or Curriculum and Instructional Management Coordinator, and they will go into the classroom, observe the teacher, and provide feedback so that they can grow and learn in their craft of being a teacher. Then on the next slide shows the alignment to the beginning teacher support program that all new teachers already have to go through as one of their requirements for any license. And so we worked with the BT coordinators to really align our program with their program to make sure that there's not a duplication of effort, but also supporting each other. And so when the teachers go through the BT program and the CTE New Teacher Institute, they will work to make sure that mentor is from the BT mentor is the same mentor that we have and as a CTE teacher. The classroom observations in the beginning teacher program, they already have to have 4 observations a year. 2 of those observations can be done by our CMICs and count for those 3 observations that we have to do. That is the discretion of the local building administrator, but it's to kind of help make sure that we're not over observing our new teachers, especially if there's their first year. And then we're asking that CTE directors and district level beginning teacher support program coordinators work together to maximize the trainings and out of class experience that these teachers need to make sure that we're aligning all of these programs to make sure they're getting the professional development that they need. So that is a high level of the CTE program. or CTE New Teacher Institute. I'm going to turn it back over to Lee.
All right, thank you, Rob. Moving through the rest of the revisions, in section 3, we have the criteria for hire and any additional criteria required to convert the initial license in a table format. So this helped us reduce the number of pages of the policy, and we think it improves the understanding as well. So there weren't a lot of changes here other than the formatting, but there were 3 areas that did have some revision. The first one, the foods and culinary license, we just clarified the description of types of work experiences that are required. For the welding license, we've added some new credential options. They actually have some educator welding licenses that we want to make available to our folks. And with public safety, we changed the required degree to any degree because the outside state agencies, the other agencies that support the public safety curriculum, they vet those folks and allow us to provide those courses. And then lastly, in section 4, this is the section for adding areas. So we combine the information on how to add an area clearly and how to add it provisionally, because really the the process is the same for the most part. So that reduced the content a little bit. We updated the credential options here for the welding license. In the CTE support licenses section, that was also reformatted to a table. For the curriculum instructional management coordinator license, there was not really an update because the requirements stay the same. The coaching course is not removed. It's just actually verified inside the curriculum instructional management coordinator course. So there's just a little bit of a paperwork reduction there in verifying what's needed to add that particular license. And that concludes all of our requested revisions. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have for us.
Thank you very much, Lee and Rob. Such a fine job, such detailed work that goes into the changes that you think about and you know are necessary to display in the policy manual for CTE, and so helpful for principals and HR professionals and superintendents. It's just amazing. I listen to your presentation and I'm always amazed. To my colleagues, questions, comments?
Okay.
Mr. Duncan.
A very, very quick question. The number of hours required for the training for the CTE, are those just styled in a new format? Are there actually additional numbers of hours for training that the teachers have to participate in?
Mr. Duncan, so the program that Rob talked about, the CTE New Teacher Training Institute, has 200 hours. That would be a choice that an educator could choose that program, or they could choose to do 18 hours of community college to satisfy the initial licensing requirements. So there's not an additional amount of hours. This is just a new option. Does that explain?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
It's a very good clarifying question. Any other questions? I do like the fact that you have in your presentation, you show the alignment between the New Teacher Institute and the Beginning Teacher Support Program. That will be very important. And Ms. White.
Just pulling together thoughts of presentations that I've already heard today. And just a reminder of verbiage in the state board's own vision for students across the state of North Carolina, that they would graduate ready for either post-secondary education or work, that they would be globally prepared and ready to collaborate in a work environment. So all students may not be going to school after they graduate from high school. I say this because then I heard from the Best NC report, and I looked at one of the slides that was presented that showed that interested parties from the publicity efforts that were made were folks that were already in industry, perhaps looking for a career change. And then I'll say that it would be highly unlikely for an educator in a educator prep program to have the industry specific standards to teach plumbing or welding, and that our most qualified professionals are most likely coming from the work environment looking to make a change in their profession. So I love it when I see this. That would eliminate barriers to quickly train, equip professionals to help teach our students to meet the end goal.
Absolutely.
Which is, again, getting students ready to be prepared to work in a globally competitive.
Absolutely. And I think our CTE.
So I appreciate very much that it would be easy to say, oh, this is incredibly work.
Absolutely it is. Other comments, questions? At some point, Ms. O'Neill, I would like for you to come back to the board and talk a little bit, maybe this is my own confusion, no one else's. Talk a little bit about, in the manual, you have some reference to escrow, building escrow for teachers. If you could remember when you come back to us for whatever reason, if you could work that into your presentation.
I'll be sure to do that when I visit with you in May.
Yeah, and remind me, and let me make sure you're doing a little bit more work on this item, clearing up some things, but it will be ready for us to act on in May.
That's correct. Section 2.04, we are going to go back and ask for that full section to be removed. And so I'll be explaining that at the May meeting.
Absolutely, and we'll talk before that May meeting in our
Yes.
prep work. Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you for your hard work. And then we'll
Thank you all. Appreciate your support.
Absolutely. And we'll move on to the next item under discussion. That's ES&P 2, and this has to do with basically some technical changes as a result of vendor changes in our middle school math test as well as our secondary mathematics test. So I believe Dr. Tomberlin is coming forward to do a kind of very brief presentation on those necessary changes for alignment.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Good afternoon, board members. We have two policy revision recommendations from the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission, or PEPC. The first involves middle school mathematics and secondary mathematics testing for licensure. These tests are required for licensing for our North Carolina teachers in those areas. The last update, I'm sorry, Dr. Townsend-Smith, could you go to slide 3, please? Thank you. The last time these two tests were updated by the by ETS was September of 2013. So they've been due for a revision, and we've received those revisions from the vendor. So the test, next slide, please. The test is being updated from number 5169 to 5164, and that comes with a change in the cut score from 165 to 157. So they have, the vendor has notified us that they've updated the content areas that are covered in this test from 2 to 5 categories. There's an increased number of questions. And adding about 30% of the questions apply to the task of teaching mathematics. So if you think back to our elementary test, our shift to the what we call the CKT, the content knowledge test, this is getting a little more at the practice of teaching mathematics and not just pure content. So we do want to note that the lower scale score should not indicate a drop in standards, but is just due to the change in the number of test items and the difficulty of those items. So we are not lowering the standard for our mathematics teachers, but the scale score is just a reflection of those the different makeup of the test. And so in secondary mathematics, again, we have a change in the code. The score is changing, the cut score, the recommended cut score from the vendor is changing from 160 to 159. You can see those additional revisions to the test there. And again, this is not a lowering of the standard. So the way we will implement this is the current tests for middle school and mathematics, 5161 and 5169 respectively, are effective until August of 2022. The updated test 5165 and 64 will be effective starting September of 2021. So candidates for licensure will have the option of taking either test up until August 2022. Then 5161 and 5169 will be phased out. And the vendor has notified us that this change and the option of taking either test will be reflected on their webpage where we list the praxis requirements for the state of North Carolina. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there questions? Dr. Tomberlin, these changes, even though I understand you to say that candidates will have the option, or test takers will have the option until 2022, but in the meantime, these changes will be made aware to EPPs, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. I always ask that about EPPs knowing deans and chairs and students. Very good, very good. Thank you so much. And we will and approve in May. Thank you, Dr. Tolkien. I think you're going to remain close by because you have ES&P 3 policy amendment to the residence license degree requirement.
Yes, ma'am. Again, thank you. And here is, board members, this is the second policy provision recommended by Pepsi. And this is due to changes or some confusion in the residency license process in the field. And so we've gone back to clarify some of the points in our policy and align those with statute. So for your reference, General Statute 115C 270.20, the residency license, here are the requirements for that. And you'll notice under B1, the statute indicates that a candidate must hold a bachelor's degree. And this is, in the way our policy was worded, our state board policy was worded, that led to some confusion. And so we want to make sure we address that. And I'll get to that in just a second. The other thing I want to point out in this is the statute says is requested by the local board of education. And I want you to pay attention to that as we move into the policy recommendation. So in 115C 269.15, we see the grade point average requirement for a residency holder, and that is that the EPP shall not admit a student into the EPP unless that student has earned a GPA of at least 2.7. Just to let you know that requirement has been waived during the 2021 school year, academic year, but that was a COVID-only provision, and that will take effect again at the end of this academic year. So for LIC in 001, section 160, the Pepsi Commission approved to align the degree requirement, that is a bachelor's degree, as stated in the general statutes. NCDPI Rules Council has asked for an update of the policy to reference relevant statutes and list requirements not in statute. So what this means is the change in policy is going to be a little larger than just what I'm going to show you, because the Rules Council decided that those things that appear in the statute should not appear in the policy, and we should just be making clarifications to that in the policy. So we have honored that request from DPI Rules Council, and then some formatting issues requested by our legal department. So here's slide 6. Dr. Townsend Smith reflects the recommended policy amendment. And I want to point out in the beginning, at the request of an employing public school unit. So we have a situation where some of the EPPs are not accepting candidates into their programs or granting them entrance into a residency program because they are currently employed by a charter school. And we have worked with the legislature, with our legislative liaisons, to understand the intent of the policy, of the statute. And it was not, the word we received was that it was not the intent that this residency license should be strictly afforded to LEAs, but that any public school unit would have the opportunity to recommend a candidate for a residency license. And so this is to help clarify to our EPP partners that charter school employees are eligible to hold a residence license. And then following along, these are just revisions where we make it clear what's required of the residency license. Those are just formatting changes. They're not substantive changes, except in the case where we are informing the field that in the policy, in the statute, a bachelor's degree is required. And the reason this is important that we state it this way is that we have had a number of situations where people have applied for a license that hold a master's degree and or a PhD or a doctorate degree, but they did not hold a bachelor's degree, an underlying bachelor's degree. It's a very rare occurrence, but it's happened a few times. And we needed to clarify that according to the law, that person must hold a bachelor's degree or they cannot qualify for a North Carolina license. And so on advice of our legal department, we have, that will be our policy moving forward, is that they must hold that bachelor's degree. And then the next is just a summary of these changes for your information. And then I am happy to take any questions about these policy revisions.
Thank you so much. Any questions or comments? Seems like necessary changes. What would you say is the most substantial change, Dr. Tomberlin? Is it pertaining to the charters having?
I think that is the most important change we're making here is the PSU language, so that it's clear that charter schools and laboratory schools and any of our other public schools have the opportunity to recommend a teacher for a residency license.
Very good. I think the shocking thing for me, and maybe some of my colleagues and others in the room, is the situations where you can have a PhD or master's without a bachelor's.
Yes, it's rare, but it has happened enough that we had to make the clarification.
Thank you so much. That's necessary clarifications. If there are no questions or comments from around the table, my agenda items have been fulfilled for April.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. We will now break until 1:15, and when we come back, we'll have a couple of agenda changes. First, we'll begin with the Community and Legislative Affairs update prior to the Business Operations Committee report. And then also for those interested in the prom and graduation guidance, we'll do that as part of the chairman's report under approval of the Strong Schools Toolkit. So we're now on break until 1:15. 1:15.
Just kidding.